Everybody, I'd like to call to order the April 21st Tredyffrin Township Board of Supervisors meeting. We say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order a public hearing to consider and possibly adopt a zoning ordinance amendment to allow the conversion of existing office buildings.
County Planning Commission, dated March 14th, 2025. Board Exhibit 6 is a copy of the applicant's exhibits for the hearing. Those are the board exhibits for tonight. I will also note for the record that the applicant is present with his counsel in case the board wants to hear from or the applicant wants to make their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do we hear any board comments or questions? Is there any public comments or questions? Sure.
I have to apologize to begin with. I presume we're talking about Devon Park Drive. I couldn't hear everything. I'm sorry. Yes, Richard Kunin, K-U-N-I-N, Chairperson, Trout Creek Watershed Residents Association. I do want to say that, as I've said in the past, and I repeat on purpose deliberately, that we support the project. We like the idea of repurposing buildings. I think when the amendment was written, the revision was written, I think you could have gone a little further and said, instead of this ordinance applies to existing buildings at the time of the ordinance is passed, it should have gone on beyond that, which I have said, because it doesn't hurt to think about the future. When you passed the solid waste ordinance, I learned that the ordinance required a fine for trash cans that were left lying on their side or left open. And I said, why are you charging such a fine? That happens all the time. When they put the trash can down with that mechanical thing, it falls over, it lands opened up. Mr. McKenna said, that's just in case the township wants to need some more money. Now, that's thinking about the future. I'm not faulting him for that. I think it's a silly thing to put in an ordinance, since it's something that's almost uncontrollable. But the point is that we need to project beyond now. Just like when we pass stormwater management, we need to go beyond the 100-year flood storm, same thing. But essentially, right now, regarding this specific project, we support it completely. I've had discussions with the developer, and we've come to an agreement about the stormwater management, and I think it's a reasonable compromise. I know that there are problems involved in bringing things up to code, what have you. The point is, the developer has agreed to redo the floor of the basin, to add soil or whatever is necessary to increase the permeability, to change the vegetation to vegetation that will use more water, and what have you. All of these things are steps in the right direction. It's not 100% of what we wanted, but it's not 100% of what we could have lost either. So I feel it's a reasonable compromise, and I appreciate that. So I am fully supportive of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Kunin.
Greg Zary, S-Z-A-R-Y, Tredyffrin resident. I'm unfamiliar with the project, so my question is, will we have an opportunity to ask more detailed or pointed questions after seeing the presentation?
I don't think there was going to be a specific presentation, but we can certainly ask the developer to outline the project.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you guys mind giving us a quick outline?
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. I'm Lou Colagreco, representing the petitioner here tonight. In a nutshell, as the board knows, and as we presented to the Planning Commission, we filed a petition on behalf of Mr. Khan to allow for the conversion of existing office buildings, there are many vacant office buildings, as the board knows, in the LI zoning district, to allow for a residential conversion, to allow for these buildings to be repurposed as essentially apartment units. We've worked on an ordinance that allows that to happen, so there's no particular project. Mr. Khan does own certain buildings, which would be the first buildings converted, maybe the only buildings converted for all I know in the future. But Eli, you can explain where your property is and what you intend to do with it if in fact the board approves this zoning ordinance amendment.
Thank you. As presented to the board and the Planning Commission over the last few months, the property in question is 435 Devon Park Drive. Many people know it originally as Buttonwood Business Park. It is located in between the Vanguard Data Center at 1041 West Valley Road and 455 Devon Park Drive, which is a building also occupied by Vanguard. Buildings were constructed in the mid-1980s. 8 separate 1- and 2-story office buildings. They're all brick buildings. Most of them have pitched roofs. There's about 467 parking spaces, including about 110 which are underneath the Pico power easement. Parking is interspersed throughout the building, so it's easy for office tenants to get in and out of the building. The building is the complex is one of about 1 million square feet of small office tenant buildings that were built in the 1980s and 1990s. Competition was originally the Woods, the Meadows, and the West Valley Business Center. Those small tenants, many of them, post-COVID, have decided to work from their homes. The complex is approximately 60% vacant, and by the end of the year, will be closer to 70% vacant, maybe even a little further. We have proposed an ordinance and presented it to the township that basically allows us to convert the inside of the buildings from office occupancy to residential occupancy, and to once again enhance the taxable base of the property, which has plummeted over the last 24 months and will continue to plummet. The property from the street, from Devon Park Drive, the physical buildings will have almost no impact at all. The exteriors of the building are remaining the same. The largest impact will be the removal of most of the impervious area in the parking lot under the power lines. Our proposal has been to, obviously we don't need all those parking spaces, but to turn that into recreational green space, mostly passive, could be a little tot lot or soccer field or what have you for the residents of the community, people coming off the trail, or other maybe businesses on West Valley Road. So in summary, that is the project. I'm happy to answer any other questions or... And I should just add, the focus of the property was to create workforce housing. This is not luxury housing. Luxury housing is being taken care of in places like Ember and Airdrie over by the train station. This is repurposing an older building that will remain older looking for the most part, and it's really focused on housing for the police and fire people, nurses, teachers, young people, and retirees.
Thank you. Do you have questions about this, or?
First question is for the township. Will this be a permanent zoning change, or is this only a change for this particular owner? And when and if the property sells, will it revert back to its original intended zoning use?
No, it will not. Once the change is made, the zoning exists until the board is so inclined to amend it again. So it will
It's a permanent change then?
permanent in that it's not based on this development. It's applicable to the entirety of the district in which the property sits.
Okay. Has any consideration been given to opening the floodgates and having, requests for additional zoning changes, not necessarily business to residential, but this might set a precedent for the township and a little hard to defeat when someone wants to make a change that may not be in the best interest of the other residents?
We've absolutely thought about that quite a bit. We think this change in particular makes sense as a way to both add workforce housing to the township and to recycle these buildings, which are currently empty. So that's how we came up with it. We are talking about having a review of our comprehensive plan and a thorough review of zoning, but that is a future project that we're going to do in the next couple of years.
One of the reasons I'm supportive of this zoning change is because it's so limited to the LI districts, which is a very, very small, there's only 2 of them in the entire township. This one with Mr. Khan's, and then Vanguard. And they're using their buildings on the very western portion, part of the township, large corporate office buildings that are in use right now. So I'm always very concerned about what you've raised, but considering the very limited application that this amendment has, it's basically for this project. That's where I'm coming out and being supportive of this project.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a good project for the township. And this is a building that's not going to be filled up. I think his proposal, Mr. Khan's proposal, is a very important and good one for the township. So that was the other part of it.
Okay. And I have several questions more for the developer. In the brief description, it sounded like there were going to be no changes to the exterior of the building. It was basically going to be an interior renovation, is the way it sounded. So I just wanted to get confirmation that these buildings weren't going to be enlarged, either vertically or in footprint size. That's one question. The second one is, has there been a study about the sewer discharge? Is there enough capacity in the system to handle that kind of a change? What kind of a traffic impact will that have on the area, making a change to residential? And then stormwater management. The property, as it's developed, probably met the stormwater management requirements at that time, but will this change be a significant enough change to affect upgrading the property to meet the current stormwater or proposed future stormwater management? That's all I have for now. Thank you.
I'm sure I forgot 3 of the 4 questions already, but I'll start with the last one. Stormwater, as part of the application and as part of the draft ordinance, which I'm sure you've read, we're required to reduce a minimum of 5% of the impervious area on the property. We are removing considerably more asphalt, including the entire front parking lot will go back to grass. So as Mr. Coonan initially talked about, we have agreed to change the bottom of the basins to amended soils, which will help those basins. But in addition, we're removing somewhere between 2 and 3 acres of asphalt, which is basically unheard of, primarily because we don't need the parking, but also to create more passive and active recreational space. So that's what's happening stormwater-wise. There's no better stormwater management than removing impervious area. I knew I forgot the other questions.
Traffic study.
Traffic. So again, we're going from 467 spaces to somewhere around 300 spaces. Traffic will go down pretty considerably from both morning and AM and PM peak, because there'll be a lot less people on the property compared to when it was a fully functioning office building. As far as the buildings will not be enlarged. The ordinance draft that you're looking at talks about no changes to the outside of the building, with the exception of things like windows and doors and any life safety issues. The intention is not to construct any new square footage on the property.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks, and there'll be a discussion in planning also at some point, right? Any other comments from the audience? Yeah.
Christopher Redmond, Township resident. I'm wondering if the demographers have weighed in on what this is going to do to the density of our schools.
Great question. It was discussed at the Planning Commission several times. We are limiting the number of two-bedroom units to no more than 30% of the units can be two bedrooms. Currently, our initial planning is actually even less than that for right now, but the majority of the units will be one bedroom and efficiency style units, again, in the effort of trying to bring in a price point that is accommodates more workforce housing. Obviously, I can't say there won't be some school children, but it's not being designed for larger units and minimizing the number of two-bedroom units.
Other comments or questions?
Hi, Don Morris. I'm a resident of TE. I'd just like to be on record saying that I think this is a terrible idea. I think any development project that adds a lot of high-density, low-income housing, I think it's naive to think that's not going to impact an already crowded school system. We've got a new school that we have to build. My school taxes went up $500 a month. I think this is a very terrible idea. I think I'm seeing a lot of high-density housing going up along that corridor. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of thought being put into like how this gets allowed, what the impact is, how it impacts the school, how it impacts the kids, the quality of the school system. You're making a change to entire zone. I'm sure it's going to be great for this individual, but how many units, how many children, like nobody knows. So I think there's a lot of risk here that I do not feel this board has adequately taken into account. And I think it's a terrible idea.
How many units are we going to build? Are you going to build in this project?
Well,
I'm asking.
We don't know, right? Like, it's an
do
entire
know.
zoning change. I mean, this individual will have one number, but then everybody else could come up. He said there's 1 million square footage. I mean, that's a lot of units. So there's risk, right? I'm sorry, it's funny, but I mean, I have kids that I want to see go through this great school system, and most of the residents here do too, okay? And this high-density housing also comes with other problems, right? There's crime, there's trash, I'm sure a lot of them are great people, but there are other problems that come with this kind of, project yard, essentially, so.
If I may, just... the larger question about the school taxes, in summary, Tredyffrin Township has 6 million square feet of Class A office space. By far and away, the largest concentration of suburban Class A office space of any municipality in a 50-mile radius of the city of Philadelphia. The Tredyffrin Township market value of those buildings, and I'm talking about from Glen Hardy up on 422, Cross Point, and all the buildings on Swedesford Road, Chesterbrook, West Lakes, Berwyn Park, South Point, et cetera, has a market value in 2023 of about $1.5 to $1.7 billion. That tax base is going to go to about $600 to $700 million. That's going to devastate the revenue of the Tredyffrin Easttown School District. This one property in 2023 paid $403,000 in total taxes, school, county, and township. Based upon my purchase price and the appeal that's pending for next year, That'll go to $97,000, from $403 to $97,000, assuming the millage stays the same. When this project is completed, it could have a market value of $10 million more than the highest market value that was ever for an office building alone. So the crisis that's coming down the pike for all the taxpayers of Tredyffrin is what happens if all of these buildings remain empty. That 6 million square feet of density in your township right now is 40% vacant, either fully vacant or subject to sublease, which means the tenant has left and is trying to sublease it. It's a tidal wave of issues coming down the road in terms of school taxes. So this, from a tax perspective, more than helps the situation.
But you're adding to the cost part of the equation as well. You're putting more children into the school systems. You're overcrowding an already overcrowded school. And the education of my kid has to suffer because of that. So I don't think it's a balanced equation. Okay. So
Thanks.
maybe
Excuse me.
So hang on, wait, we have to go to the microphone because it's impossible
Yeah, I
for her to
need him back.
record you. So you have to come back up to the microphone if you
Yeah, I
want to
need
talk.
him.
And then I think Carlotta has a question she wants to
I,
ask.
I appreciate the business lesson, but I'm saying you're also adding cost to this equation. You're adding more children into the school system. There's going to be more kids sitting in there with my kids. There's going to be less attention. It's going to degrade the quality of education, and that's why people move here. That's why people are willing to spend so much on their housing, so they can be a part of this great school system. So you can't just address one side of the equation. It's going to be great for you, I get it, I get it. But more people like you are going to come, and there are going to be more units, and there's going to be more kids. And then you're going to be asking us to put up more money to build a new school. It's just, where does it end, I mean, I understand commercial real estate isn't what it was.
I think we have the message. Thank you. Let's, Carlotta. We have other
No,
people
excuse me,
want
I need him to stay there. Excuse me, sir, I need you back up here just for 1 minute. Okay, I need this to go on the record, because you said something prior before he got up, and it kind of got up underneath my skin. And I'm going to use this word really nicely. You're presuming, there's a presumption, that if he builds these 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom efficiencies, that it's going to be set up with people who are going to be having 1, 2, 3 children. They're going to be low income or what have you. Now, from what I picked up from him, and this is just my own opinion, he is looking to take a building that, as he said, if it becomes empty, we're not going to get any tax base. So your taxes are going to go up whether there are children there, whether there are senior citizens there, whether whoever is there. If we are trying to keep the taxes low, and if he's asking to take a building that is empty, turn it into efficiencies, I know I had asked him, would it be set up for ADA in case someone is handicapped? He advised me, yes. We have no idea if children are going to be in there. We have no idea if they're going to be low income. Let me finish.
All the more reason you shouldn't approve this.
No, let me finish.
Exactly my point.
No,
You don't know.
Let me finish. The question or the problem that I have is that you are presuming that this is going to take place. But nobody up here has a crystal ball and nobody can confirm it. So if I'm getting what you're saying is that we are this great township, which I've lived here for numerous years, never had a child in the school system because my child was older at the time, but I'm paying school taxes and not a penny has ever been used. So who am I to say that someone who may not be able to afford a $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 million house that is actively working, going to pay their taxes, cannot move into this area? It's like I'm saying this place is off limits to everybody. There's no guarantee of what is coming as far as children. It could be an apartment with all senior citizens. Nobody knows if children are coming, and if he is saying I'm only going to have maybe 20 apartments, at this gate, most people, there are a lot of young people who are not having children because they can't afford the children. So I think it's wrong to say that. And I'm not saying I'm for it or against it, but I can't presume that that one building is going to make us have to build another school building. I don't see that.
But it's an entire zone.
It is an entire zone, but that doesn't mean that it's going to get overrun with people having children.
It doesn't mean it's not either.
And that's the catch.
So why would we approve this without having a more thoughtful assessment of the impact?
Because you want me to hedge my bets and lose tax money that might make your school taxes go up versus attempting to have something that may help offset your taxes. That's all I got to say.
Or we find another business that wants to move in there, and maybe he has to lower
That's
his
not
rent.
happening.
Why is that our problem?
But here's the catch, that's really not happening, because if you look, most companies are downsizing. They found out that it's cheaper to have their workers at home because they save rent.
I mean, I hear other things too. I hear that businesses are wanting people to come back into the office, and maybe it's just a matter of time. I don't know, maybe he's asking too much for it. I just feel like there's not a lot of thought being put into this. I've made this point. Again, I think this is a terrible idea. I don't think this is not like a great strategy for preserving our community. I don't think anyone's really giving this enough thought. I think there could be better ways to look at uses of that land and that real estate that everybody could prosper from. I think putting high-density housing in should be a last option.
Appreciate your point.
I'm not presuming anything about these people, what they will do, who they will bring, or anything like that. All I'm saying is it just seems like it is.
Yeah. Okay, sir, we appreciate your point, and I think we have put a fair amount of time into this. We have other people who want to speak.
Thank you very much. Mr. Khan said that 30% of the apartments in that building will be two-bedroom apartments. As far as I'm concerned, percentages don't mean anything because we don't know how many apartments will be in the building. I would like to ask Mr. Khan if 30% will be two-bedroom apartments, how many apartments will that actually be?
Well, we're talking about around 160 to 65 units total. So max 30% would be 48, around 48.
So 48 apartments with two bedrooms. If a family moved in, it's usual, as we know from our culture, that if parents have two children, oftentimes both children share the same bedroom until they're, 10, 12 years old or something, when they decide they want their own bedrooms. Well, if you can't get 3, 6, how many kids can you get into a two-bedroom apartment without causing family havoc and domestic distranquility? The point is that we have to consider the number of people who are likely to move into that space who will have children. Not the percentage doesn't mean anything. 38 apartments, so it's 38 kids. I spent my career in education. 38 kids is one classroom. It's not it's not going to break the school district.
All right, thanks, Mr. Coonan.
I think, and I think, maybe at the risk of starting never mind, I won't say it.
Thanks, yeah, thanks.
Mr. Coonan.
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate Ms. Johnston-Pugh. I do agree that we need
your name. I'm sorry, we need your name.
Liz Mercogliano, resident. Mercogliano. Town in Italy, little jazz town. I appreciate that. Can we, besides the idea that I was on the school board, so they do have a calculation that you can go to the school board maybe and ask. They estimate on what apartments would bring, and there are also residential rules where you can have one bedroom. I'm also in real estate investment. One bedroom is like for 1 or 2 people. You can't have children in that bedroom. But the fact is, if you're having 38, they used to say 2.4 kids per apartment was their estimate, and they would wait till right before the beginning of the year, September, to figure out how many kids. But I do think both people have absolute good stories, but it will affect the education. But they will expand because they have big classrooms. I have a school teacher daughter there. So I really think people should, instead of arguing about it, just like go to the school board or the school district, call HR and figure out what their calculations are. Is it 2.4 per two-bedroom apartment? And that's how they figure out the numbers, like a statistical thing. So we don't have to juggle arguments, but I do agree that we need different housing. Is there any way we could find out like the estimate on the monthly cost to rent there? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
It's a little early for that, but we're estimating somewhere in the 1,700 to 1,800 range for a one-bedroom.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was pretty decent. And I am a nurse, so thank you for thinking that way, but if you hustle, you can make a lot of money in nursing.
Thanks, guys. Any other comments from the public? Any other board comments or questions? Ready to vote? This is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Due to the very unique circumstances of this development, I will vote aye. I've been fervently cautious on development in Tredyffrin Township and voted no on several projects, I think just about all of them, with regard to residents, but this is such a limited scope amendment to the Tredyffrin Township zoning code. It's why I'm voting aye on this.
Thank you. Supervisor Gussie.
I'm voting aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
I vote aye as well, and again, this is a very limited zoning change, and there are a number of, in the township, we have a number of checks along the way so that we don't really have unrestricted development, so I'm voting aye.
Thank you. Supervisor Johnson-Pugh.
I'm voting aye, and I'm going to put an amendment to it. I believe that this is a small step. I don't think that it's going to blow up, that we're going to have tons and tons of development doing this. And so if this is one time that we can make it work and help out and, help the township get tax money that they may be losing, I'm going to say yes.
Another thing I would add is that the point about commercial real estate being in stress in the township is an important point. This development in particular is stressed, and the idea that we can repurpose it, recycle it essentially, without tearing it down and make it into housing, which we do need housing in the township, I think is a very sensible use for the project. I definitely agree with the point that Supervisor Holt had made, that this is a very limited scope. This is, applies to a very small area of the township. And we are being pretty careful on how we redevelop, so this makes sense. I vote aye. Thank you. Motion carries. And that concludes the public hearing. Now we have announcements. Thomas Road is closed for roadway work, restoration activities, and paving starting Monday, April 14th through mid-May. Now we go to approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The minutes are approved. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal matters. Now we go to supervisor liaison reports. Supervisor Humble.
Thank you. The Parks and Recreation Board met on Wednesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. here in the Township Building. And at that time, did a reorganization meeting by which the chair was elected was Diane Van Mall, Vice Chair Rafi Terzian, and Secretary Portia Trisdorfer. We received a police report on various happenings in the parks. One thing that we did hear of is that there's been lots of off-leash dogs in Tea Garden Park lately that are not under control. So we think that's really important because the dog owners have to have their dog under voice control in order to have them off-leash at Tea Garden Park. Additionally, anybody taking their dog there to go off-leash has to have a special dog license issued by the township. When that rule was put into effect, there were approximately 180 licenses issued initially, but only about 10 people have renewed this year so far. So we are asking them to get on top of that and renew it before we do a crackdown. Additionally, we heard that the new bridge at Cedar Hollow Park is finished, so people who like to go out there to go for a walk or a bike ride. It should be very nice. Additionally, we talked about the egg hunt that was coming up for the part, not this past weekend, but the one before, but it was rained out. And we talked about the construction documents for Friendship Park have been finalized, and that Wilson Farm Park's rebids are out for new updates for the work to be done there. Parks were assigned to each Parks and Rec board member, so each member would be keeping their eye out on that particular park and reporting back with any changes or any maintenance issues that they noticed that needed to be done. And then we heard from a visitor, Dan Klein, who had attended to ask whether electric vehicle spots could be placed in Wilson Farm Park. He's asking for charging stations to be located there. However, we heard from Darren Fitzgerald, who heads our Public Works, that there isn't sufficient electric infrastructure in Tredyffrin's parks to add charging stations. So that was the extent of our meeting, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Humble. Supervisor Holt?
No reports this evening.
Supervisor Gussie?
No reports this evening.
Supervisor Wysocki?
Thank you. I think I'm going to fill the void here. I have 5 reports this evening. Starting with first the Historical Commission. The Tredyffrin Township Historical Commission met on April 10th and discussed a number of matters, including a neighborhood historical walk set for Saturday, May 17, from 1 to 3 in North Berwyn at Cassat Avenue. Featured property will be the historic First Church of Christ Scientist, 2 Victorian houses, and the Hillcrest Mansion. The commission also welcomed Angela Scully from Chester County, who's working with the municipalities and getting ready for America's 250th anniversary in 2026. One of the things discussed was what's known as a Dare to Declare, which are readings of the Declaration of Independence at different locations throughout the county and the various municipalities, and such as schools, places of worship, and other locations, and events. Lastly, and the commission discussed other items. I'm not hitting on all of them, but lastly, the last meeting highlight was a mention of the Tredyffrin Heritage Center of Dupertai House, which is proposed to be one of the Chester County's America 250 Heritage Center to tell the historic story of Tredyffrin and the region. That takes care of the Historic Commission. Let's move now to the Traffic Committee. Traffic Committee met on March 19 and considered a number of traffic concerns. Among them are the following, and I'm just going to go down the list real quick with what the problem was and what the response of the Traffic Committee was. Crosswalk request at Old Lancaster Road and Russell Road, not possible, it's too dangerous. Stop sign request at Briar Road and Chestnut Lane. The committee will move forward with a consideration of a sign at that location. South Valley Road concerns Circular Road. PennDOT has the control in that area, but the police will look into more police presence and review of speed. Speed concerns on Pugh Road. There will be a speed study done on Pugh Road. The committee also briefly discussed the proposed ordinance which would limiting the parking of commercial vehicles, larger vehicles, and trailers on public roads. The next meeting of the Traffic Committee is June 18th. On to the Zoning Hearing Board. The Zoning Hearing Board met on March 27th and heard 4 appeals. First, the ZHB granted a 12-month extension, a 12 12-month extension to the applicant seeking a special exception to permit a multifamily dwelling at 311 South Valley Forge Road. Second, the board heard two separate appeals for setback variances, one for 750 Bear Road and one for 425 Old Eagle School Road, and announced that it would render decisions on those appeals at its meeting of April 24. Lastly, the zoning hearing board approved the variance for the use of 900 West Valley Road, Suite 600, for use as a medical office. Next meeting of the ZHB will be on April 24th. Planning Commission. The Planning Commission met on March 20th and considered two matters. First, the PC gave final approval to Mainline Padel for the construction of 3 Padel courts and an associated 172 square foot office building on the property located at 341 East Conestoga Road in Wayne. Second, the Planning Commission recommended to the Board of Supervisors for consideration the petition of Russell Road Developers, LLC, requesting that the Board of Supervisors adopt an ordinance to amend certain portions of the zoning code of the township to permit age-qualified, single-family, detached and semi-detached dwellings, parentheses, twins, close parentheses, in the C1 district, subject to certain limiting requirements. The next meeting of the Planning Commission was on April 17, 2025. Lastly, the Planning Commission again met on April 17th and considered the following two matters. First, the PC, after considering information from the township's sanitary sewer system consultant and the Township Municipal Authority, recommended to the Board of Supervisors the sale of up to 270,000 gallons per day of excess reserve sewer capacity to the Valley Forge Sewer Authority to meet the capacity needs of several member municipalities. Second, and the last item for the evening, the Planning Commission commented on the sketch plan and other information presented by the North American Islamic Trust for its expansion of facilities at 958 North Valley Forge Road and improvements at 966 North Valley Forge Road. In accordance with township ordinances, the Planning Commission's comments will go to the Zoning Hearing Board as the trust seeks variances for its project. The next meeting of the Planning Commission is on May 15th, and that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wysocki. Supervisor Bhaskar.
Thank you, Chairman, and I would like to start by thanking Supervisor Wysocki for covering for me at the Traffic Committee meeting. The Environmental Advisory Council met on Tuesday, March 25th, and 10 to 15 trees are being added to the northern area of Wilson Farm Park. Then a garlic mustard pull was planned for Krabby Creek Park on Monday, March 31st. I don't know if it happened, but I presume it did. And a macroinvertebrate study is scheduled for Sunday, April 27th. And that's something where a Girl Scout troop participates and they have a lot of fun and learn a lot. An Aqua Essentials grant presentation in streambank restoration hosted by the EAC and the library is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 29th at the Stratford Public Library and also virtually. Registration is required and you can do that through the library website, and I believe there should be some cards at the back on the project, on the presentation. Trex plastic bag and film recycling at the library is going well, and the volunteers are scouting for a second location. Then finally, the Upper Mainline YMCA plans to showcase electric lawn equipment at their Earth Day event on Saturday, April 6th. The next meeting of the EAC is tomorrow, Tuesday, April 22nd, at 7 p.m. in the community room. The Library Board of Trustees met on Thursday, May 27th, and with Willistown board member Marianne Murphy stepping off the board as she is moving out of Willistown, the board has a vacancy for a member from Willistown. So if you know of anyone from Willistown who cares to serve on the Library Board of Trustees, please, ping them. Paoli Library is looking to hire staff so that they can be open on Sunday. And the board also acknowledged that 2025 is the 50th year of the founding of the Friends of Tredyffrin Public Library. So they provide a lot of funding to the library. They take book donations from residents and then sell the books, and then the money goes to the library. So their work is an important part of the support for the library. The next meeting of the Library Board of Trustees will be held on Thursday, April 24th at the Stratford Library. And that ends my report. Thank you, Chair Miller.
Thank you, Supervisor Bashkar. Supervisor Johnston-Pugh.
I don't have any reports, but I also need to thank Supervisor Wasaki for going to the meeting for me.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnston-Pugh, and thank you, Supervisor Wysocki. We're busy. I have a motion to appoint Mac Heckadorn to the UCC Board. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you know, we have a Uniform Construction Appeals Board in the Township. It is used for building code disputes. We have a vacancy. Mr. Heckendorn has submitted his application. He's an architect with a firm in the Township, interviewed by the Board of Supervisors this evening, and we recommend his appointment to the board. He's actually taken an appeal on behalf of an outside entity to the Township Board in the past, about 7 years ago, so he's familiar with the process and will be a great addition. Happy to answer any questions.
Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a second? Second. Any board comments or questions? But I would just add that I know I've met Mr. Heckendorn and I've worked with him. I think he's a fabulous addition to the board. I think he'd be a great service to the township. Any other supervisor public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we have the reapportionment committee update. Mr. Onstad.
Thank you. So for those who have missed the last two Board of Supervisor meetings, the Board of Supervisors on a whatever basis is supposed to continue to look as we get new census numbers for populations, try to keep the 3 voting regions for the supervisors about equal in population. And when the Board of Supervisors last looked at this, they saw that the populations were a little bit more out of sync than they wanted to. So a little while ago, they approved a reapportionment committee to be formed and look into proposals to give to the Board of Supervisors to potentially approve. And that happened, and this is actually hopefully the final report, depending on the Board of Supervisors' actions tonight. So the reapportionment committee last met on Monday, March 24th. We discussed the 3 candidates for the plan to recommend to the Board of Supervisors for the reapportionment process. We came up with 3 candidates. There's a website that was created and mentioned at the last Board of Supervisor meetings. So what we had originally was 13 various plans that had a certain population maximum deviation. And out of those 13, at the prior board meeting, we kind of limited it down to 3 of them, the committee did, that we were looking at. So we named them A, B, and C, which correlated to plans 10, 11, and 12. At our last committee meeting, we quickly removed Plan 12. So if you want to look quickly, this is the way our maps look today. Red is the west region, green is the middle region for the supervisor, and then blue is the east region. So you have candidates running in those 3 regions. And again, those populations were off. It's a little hard to see, but the maximum deviation between the smallest and the largest population is about 22%, which is a really high number. It's higher than we want to see it. So what we looked at it, we got it down to 3 plans. We quickly eliminated Plan C. This is what the map looked like for Plan C. There were a couple of negatives on this that allowed us to eliminate it pretty quickly. One was that it introduced the greatest amount of change. It was not much better in regards to maximum deviation compared to the other 2 plans, A and B. It's not that compact. So compacting is supposed to look like it's not like gerrymandered out, right? And so if you, it's just too strung out, and like the blue region, if you see the east region, you can see it's like indented in and just all kind of stretched. Other things we didn't like about it, M5 and M6 precincts were separated and Pugh Road was split up. So we quickly discarded this one, which left us with A and B. So then we looked at A, actually it's not true. We looked at A and B flip-flopping back and forth because there was a little bit of a debate going on. So for Plan A, this one here, you can see that the maximum deviation is only 5%. So it went from 22% down to 5%. Much better change in population. We compared this against B, so you have to kind of keep them in context. This is what B looks like, and this is what A looks like. So for A, it's slightly more compact than B on the positives, slightly lower maximum deviation. However, what we didn't like about it was M5 and M6 were separated from each other, and more importantly, this had a higher disruption of precincts. More precincts would be flip-flopping between the regions, so it caused more change. Then we looked at Plan B, which is this guy here, and if you look, if I flip between the current region and B, you will see that only one precinct actually changes. This precinct that I've highlighted right here. That's the only change between our current map and Plan B. What we liked about this one was that M5 and W3 would now be able to vote together. We liked that M5 and M6 were together. And it has, as I just said, Plan B has the least amount of change over the current maps that we use today. And it has a pretty good maximum deviation. So in the end, the committee was unanimous in forwarding Plan B, the one I have up on the screen here, to the Board of Supervisors as the official recommendation because it has, Plan B only had slight benefits and it didn't outweigh the disruption it was going to cause. I would like to thank Ed Sweeney, Alan Yockey, David Miller, Julie Gossi, and K.S. Bhaskar for serving on the committee, and Bill Martin for assisting with the process. This precinct here, and so this is W5, and then M4 Chesterbrook. We actually had a lot of conversations about Chesterbrook. Chesterbrook was well represented. In the end, we had it split up. Chesterbrook was well represented with 2 members of the committee, myself being one of them. We're from Chesterbrook. In the end, we didn't feel it was that negative impact and that Chesterbrook would still have good representation because just the population of W5 alone gives it weight, and same thing with M4. So we weren't overly concerned with that. But that was a consideration that we did bring up.
My major concern, and why I'm probably not going to go along with this recommendation, I would have liked to seen the western portion of the township focused on Paoli and the rural regions, more rural regions, having a supervisor from the middle in Chesterbrook, and then with the east. So I'm not, maybe speak a little more about the discussions, but I'm a little hung up on the division between that.
Right, so the other plan then you would be talking about would be candidate A that I was referring to, where there's a number of precincts that flip-flop back and forth. And again, the committee, as a committee, decided that the change of the one precinct overweighed one of the things about Chesterbrook, because besides that one, we kept everything together that we wanted to keep together. So, I mean, again, that was a concern, and we did discuss that. I don't know if anyone else on the committee wants to speak to that.
I'd like to speak to that, which is that one of the reasons, at least that I felt we should stick with fewer disruptions is because the way the regional elections are for supervisor, if you change a lot of the precincts, then it could be that people who expect to be electing a supervisor this year will not be electing a supervisor this year, and vice versa. So since the differences between the different options are so small, going with an option where only one precinct actually changes regions seem to me to make sense.
One thing we have, sorry, I mean, this is, not being on the committee is, we gotta ask these questions. So do you represent the M4 right now? I know you represent the West, but do you have M4 now? Bhaskar, you do not. So the current region, this is the current map.
Yeah, so just to comment, so I mean, I live in Chesterbrook, it's currently, Chesterbrook is split today. It seems to work fine that way because of where it's split is sort of between parcel 1 and parcel 19, if that, for people who live in Chesterbrook would know what that means. Sorry. So that's, I'm trying to answer your, sorry, you're right, but I'm trying to speak to everybody. So it sort of works today, it's been that way for a long time. I mean, we know how it is, we both are splitting it, so it seems to work in this, and to Supervisor Bhaskar's point, the one we chose is the minimum disruption, which seemed to make the most sense for what we're trying to accomplish here today. In the future, if the county were to redo the actual precincts and make them, redo the precinct boundaries so that you had a different tool to work with, because right now there's big differences in the size of the precincts, so it makes it a little bit tough to make it equal without splitting up neighborhoods and things, but that's how we ended up here.
And remind me, are we doing this every 10 years? So we are 4 years late.
Yeah, but the census wasn't actually officially certified until like 23, something like that, so we're actually not really behind.
We're not that late, actually, given what happened here, yeah. And just the last thing I would want to just to say to everybody here is I think Mr. Onestad thanked us, but I want to thank him for all his hard work. I mean, the tool he built has been extraordinarily easy to work with, and he ran a very thorough and easy to manage process to get us through what is a complicated, kind of math decision relatively easily. So I appreciate all the hard work, Doug. Thank you.
If I can just comment on the Chesterbrook thing, if you look at the map A, which actually came up number 2 really, that keeps Chesterbrook together. Another concern that was mentioned, quite frankly, is that Chesterbrook would totally overpower everything else combined in that area. And that was a concern, actually, that it would help Chesterbrook because we basically get to pick our candidate. But really, the other ones might be really kind of, it might be overweighted for Chesterbrook. That actually got brought up as a concern. And I also like to point out the precinct issue too. That's a very real thing. Our precincts, like if you look at, some of them are very large, other ones are very small, oddly shaped. There's one here that has very small population. Like it's very hard to come up with really good maps with the precincts we have today. Unfortunately, that's a much bigger project that this committee was not tackling.
So anyway, just if that helps to think about it. Thank you. Any other comments? Any comments from the public?
Ray Clark, when is this effective, Doug?
When the Board of Supervisors votes on it.
So for the primary?
No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This will not be this year at all.
Okay, so that's kind of very important as someone who is married to someone responsible for this.
Yes. Yeah, no.
Ray, Mr. Clark, there's a whole other, that's the next thing is a motion to approve this, and then we'll talk about the process to actually get it implemented. It's a long process. This isn't happening tomorrow, don't worry.
No time soon.
Okay. In general, I would side with Supervisor Holt on preferring number 10, but I see the reasons why you went with the way you did.
Any other public comments or questions? But that was a good question. When is it effective? It's not for this election. Okay, thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Or Mr. Onestad. So I hear a motion. Now we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the reapportionment committee. Mr. Martin.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Doug kind of stole my thunder. He thanked the committee. I want to thank everyone who really put the work into this. It's not an easy task to try to balance all the interests and making it a fair representation in terms of what we have to submit in terms of process. So thank you for the work. Thank you, Doug, really for creating this perfect map that we could use internally and without having to hire a consultant to drill down, and would have cost the taxpayers, probably a decent amount of money to create the same thing that he had at his fingertips for us. So we can't thank you enough, Doug. Really appreciate all the effort and the time you put into it. In terms of process, thank you. So the question is process, and with this motion, so if it is approved by the board, that will authorize the solicitor and I to begin the process to submit the plan to Chester County and the Department of State with the Commonwealth. They will also have to review the maps and make sure that they deem them as accurate and fair and meeting all the criteria that both the county and state will require. It meets our charter requirement of less than 15% standard deviation, so that box has been checked, and I think we've done as best as we could with the information we have. So it really just begins the process. It will not impact this election. It will affect the next municipal election in 2027. So happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Now, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other board comments or questions? I think we exhausted it, but anything else? Resident comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to approve Girl Scout project at Tredyffrin Library. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. There's a memo in your packet for our Girl Scout project that has come through the library from Mallory Hoffman and her staff. There's a Girl Scout, Miss Peng, who is looking to create a project to raise funds and purchase 3 American heritage trees to plant at Tredyffrin Public Library in Stratford Park. It goes into the details. She hopes to raise the money to buy and purchase these trees and plant them in the park as part of her Girl Scout project. So pretty straightforward, where the library board has already approved this project, just form a part of the process to, since it's on our property, have the board of supervisors also concur. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Second. Thank you. Any comments or questions? It sounds like a worthwhile project, honestly. Any public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adopt resolution 2025-10 to authorize the disposition of public records as set forth in the Municipal Records Manual in accordance with Act 428 of 1968. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As required by state law, anytime the township disposes of old records, we need a resolution. A lot of this stuff is, again, we go through, clean outs every once in a while, but, we file the manual, so it's a lot of old financial records that we can get rid of, but the list is sent to the state, they approve it, and then we shred.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do we hear a motion? Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? This is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble?
Aye.
Supervisor Holt?
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie?
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki?
Aye.
Supervisor Bhaskar?
Aye.
Supervisor Johnston Pugh?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Motion to approve change order for the Bear Road Stormwater Project. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, as the board's aware, the township is working on a stormwater project on Bear Road. We're presently working with Site Preparations LLC, our contractor, to finish that work. It's expected to be done in May of this year. In the process, we've identified another property just to the west of where we're currently working on Bear Road that has a need. There is a drainage pipe system and outfall that is basically in huge disrepair, and it is basically, we looked at it and we did recommend that we get that replaced. We got an estimate from our contractor for this, with this change order, and we are recommending 150 linear feet of pipe to be removed and replaced, and a new outfall to be installed with a new stone outlet structure. So we're asking the board for consideration to approve change order for Site Preparations LLC as part of the Bear Road Stormwater Project in the amount of $57,381.49, as well as additional request of $5,000 not to exceed for Jacobs for any construction inspections for this additional work.
Thank you.
This also, just to be clear, this would be funded under the Stormwater Fund dollars for this.
Thank you, Mr. Burgo. Any board comments or questions? Oh, I'm sorry, motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Now, any board comments or questions? Thank you. I've been out there. I think it's an important thing to get done, so I don't have any doubt that this is something we should do. Any resident comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the easement agreements for the Willis Woodcrest Upper Weedley Stormwater Drainage and Improvement Project for the following properties, and there's a list of 6 properties. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller, members of the board, tonight we have 6 different easements. They are temporary construction easements, and then there's some permanent construction and access easements. These easements have been reviewed by the solicitor's office and worked on with township staff. We've just basically disseminated these to the residents and spoken with them. We have several of them that have been returned, signed, and notarized, and the other ones are in that process. These are necessary for the construction work that we'll be doing for Willis, Woodcrest, and Upper Weedley. That project is out to bid right now, and we expect bids to be in May. So we're asking the board for consideration and approval of those easements, and then to be able to sign them once we get them back from the residents.
Hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize township engineering staff to work with Jacobs on submitting a PADEP Growing Greener grant for the future West Circular Avenue Drainage and Improvements Project, Phase 1 for engineering, planning, survey, and design work. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller, members of the board, as you look at our capital plan, our 5-year capital plan, there's a stormwater project for the future identified for West Circular Avenue. We've had a history of flooding in that area with the development in Paoli, as well as runoff coming off of PennDOT's roads and our own roads and all the impervious surfaces. There is need of drainage improvements and some stormwater management, and we have had discussions with Jacobs, our team who's worked us on other projects. We've met with DEP. We've had several successful PAD Growing Greener grants in the past. We had a field meeting with them to go over the current round that's open. They're accepting grants through the end of June. And we think that this would be a good thing to break this up into 2 phases, apply for a design phase, requesting 75% of the funding for the design from DEP with this grant, and then the township would match 25%. It would be a future year, 2026, 27, probably, budget what we'd have. We'd look at that for next year and the year after. We would probably not hear back from DEP until December 31st, maybe at the earliest, or early next year. But we have to get the grant application worked on and submitted before the end of June. So what we're asking for authorization to work with Jacobs and submit a grant application to DEP for this project.
Thank you, Mr. Burgo. Do we hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any board comments or questions?
This is an important project. It's been out there for a long time. I've seen it. I experienced it. It's just a lot of water from a PennDOT road flowing down into our township residents' property. So very thankful that we're moving forward on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Supervisor Holt on this, and I also appreciate the fact that we're writing grant applications and trying to get as much money as we can from outside the township to support the work we're doing. So thank you, Mr. Burgo.
One thing I forgot to mention is this would be phase 1. So if we get grant money for this, we're more likely to potentially get grant money for construction phases in the future. So we would, submit this, work through the design process. When we have good idea of the plan we would have, we could submit it, submit an application for construction as well.
Oh, I realize that, and I realize the big money is going to be the actual project, so we understand that. But thank you. Any public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve a letter of support for the Valley Forge Trout Unlimited DCED Stormwater Grant application for the Krabby Creek Elizabeth Lane Stormwater Infiltration. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, we have a letter of support for this Krabby Creek Elizabeth Lane stormwater project. As the board recalls, last year we had completed 3 stormwater projects, one on Laurel Lane, one on Williams, and one on Beechwood as part of this Krabby Creek stormwater project. The Valley Forge Trout Unlimited have gotten multiple grants for that process, And then as part of this process, the bids had come back high for those projects, so we basically held off this specific project. It is designed, so we're basically seeking some additional money for construction. They had already received one grant from DEP for $150,000. They found out earlier this year, so that was successful. They're looking to go to DCED for an ask of $100,000. And then the township has identified money in next year's budget already as a placeholder. And what the numbers are in here would basically be in line with what we already have as a placeholder in there.
Mr. Burgo, do I hear a motion? Hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve change order 16 and 17 for 23 Bridge Avenue Fire Station project. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight, staff is asking approval, retroactive approval of change order 16 and 17. This is to get power to the building. The total cost is $93,445.80. This, in the early estimates was, we had, I think, almost $150,000 identified, so came in significantly less, but again, got to keep things moving. This money will come out of the contingency.
Thank you, Mr. DeRocco. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? The reality is this is a requirement that's been put onto us from PICO. I mean, that's why we're making the changes. This isn't money we're trying to spend except because PICO said they need to have it a certain specific way. Similar to the problems we had with Aqua and the way the water meter needed to be installed. So that's what's happening here. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize the Berwyn Fire Company to use unrestricted capital funds not to exceed $375,000 in fiscal years 2025 and 2026 for the purposes of fire and EMS staffing. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is something that we've actually been planning on and working with Berwyn Fire Company on, but their auditors recognized that we needed a formal vote. We only did that for, I think, 2024. We did it last year. So this is just to formalize for 25 and then 26.
Thank you, Mr. DeRocco. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions?
Ray Clark again. I'm trying to understand what's going on with the Fire Commission. But we could first start with this. There's a statement in the memo that says, by approving the use of this capital, the members of the Board of Supervisors commit to supporting this level of fire and EMS staffing in future years. What does that mean? Does that mean increase in the fire fund?
We decided that they need to have this level of staffing to provide proper fire protection for the township's residents. And we're committed to helping them hire staff to
So you're committing to providing 200 grand a year, plus or minus?
We're committed to a staffing level, and I would expect that's going to continue to increase.
So you're committing to a future tax increase? Yes, no?
Well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're committing to a staffing level that we think is necessary to provide protection that's required for the township residents.
So is there like a formula that compares the amount of money the township gives to Berwyn versus the amount it gives to Radnor versus the amount it gives to Paoli?
Yes, there's a formula we've been using for years.
So that means that there'll be an increase in the amount that goes to Paoli as well?
So we have a fire administrator now, and he is doing a great job coming up with a plan. And when, Mr. DeRocco, what is the timing of when he will kind of present plans to the public? Because, yeah, we're kind of in a lot of strategy phase internally, but the
Yeah, I
public
think
hasn't gotten to see that.
He's in Easttown tonight presenting, so we'll plan on having him at our May meeting to give a broader look at this.
So we're making this commitment for future years ahead of that plan.
So this is something that we've been working with Berwyn Fire Company on, rather than increase funding now in terms of tax dollars. Berwyn Fire Company had ample money in reserves in capital. And so we're drawing that money down before we have to increase taxes to the Tredyffrin in Easttown, while we figure out what the total picture is going to be for the TE Fire Department long-term.
So I also see that Paoli is not joining the Fire Commission or Fire Department, whatever it's called, in 2026. How does that impact how much money Paoli gets versus how much money Berwyn gets?
So Ray, I think we should wait till next month and we'll give you a whole presentation on what we're planning. I think that's a better way to do this with a presentation.
I mean, the material was put in to the,
No, I get it, yeah, yeah.
page 160 or something like that of the board materials. So I thought maybe it was for discussion.
Yeah, that's non-agenda items. Those will go to the board's packet. That's why they're in there. It's a draft document.
There's often a danger when these things are previewed.
Yep.
That then they're locked in.
Correct. But
So
he's
this
scheduled,
is not-
unfortunately, there's two townships and we meet both on the same night. And Easttown got first shot, so he's at Easttown tonight and he's going to be at our May meeting to present the same information.
Okay. Well, I guess we're looking forward to a full discussion of really what's going on and how this whole funding thing works and who's part of it and who's not. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Mike Heberg, I'm a Berwyn resident. I had a follow-up on Ray's excellent questions. I guess I'm still struggling to understand the unrestricted capital fund and how we're using that for operating expenses. That's what this is, right?
So when the townships in our budgets, excuse me, when we make our contributions to the fire companies each year, in the past, there's been a certain amount allocated between operating. For a while, we were breaking out ALS and then capital. So by doing that in our budgets, we've restricted the money that the fire companies have. And in order to use that money, we're saying for operating purposes, we as the people who gave them the money, similar as, restricted funds at any nonprofit, we have to essentially release the restriction as the, donor.
So will that leave us short on either capital or capital commitments that we've made?
So part of the long-term picture is that the capital funding will be on, for the townships. So last year we bought the fire engine. We have to purchase an ambulance on the agenda. These are the assets that the, potentially, the future TE Fire Department are going to own. Therefore, we don't need the capital funding and the capital dollars to sit with, at this point, Berwyn Fire Company potentially, Paoli down the line, but we don't need that because we're going to be funding it directly and owning it.
Okay. And is there a staffing level that's been committed to above and beyond what's represented in this dollar amount into the future? It feels like we've committed to spend a significant amount more than we're spending now. And that beyond that, there's another staffing level above and beyond that. So to Ray's point, I think it would be very helpful before these commitments are all made for the public to actually know what the strategy is. And so it seems to me that some of these authorizations may be premature based on that. I mean, we're committing money based on the expectation that there's a plan in place and the public hasn't seen the plan. And I guess I will ask, while I'm up here, as to the ambulance, is this, so we're using money that was targeted for a fire truck for replacement of an ambulance this year? And so was this an ambulance that was to be bought in a couple of years and we're flip-flopping them, or, and maybe that's going to come later, but I just figured rather than have to come back up here and bother you guys again, I would just, maybe you can address it when that point comes, because there was also mention of an ambulance that was a 2021 ambulance that needs a new motor, and it's unclear in the memo whether that ambulance is going to get a new motor or is going to be replaced by the one we're going to buy for $221,000. So I'll just ask those questions while I'm standing here.
Sure. Just a second. Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the staffing, there's already been an existing level of staffing that there's a funding shortfall. As part of the fire administrator's plan, there is a ramp up in staffing, which he'll present, again, he's building that, and that'll be a part of his presentation, right? That's going to be his ask to the Tredyffrin and Easttown boards to fund what we'll have to work out, and we'll get into it'll be in his presentation, I assume, will be that, there'll be a transition between, kind of how we're doing things now to where we're going. And part of that's going to be actually building out the full budget and determining how much more money the townships need to invest to, obtain his staffing level that he's requesting. Capital planning that I'll help him with in terms of working with Berwyn and Paoli on apparatus replacement, stuff like that. In terms of the ambulance, we're replacing I think it's a 2006.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially a rusted out van. Engine sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. There's serious doubts about its ability to even pass inspection. So what Joe did was go out and find the most reasonably priced ambulance. He was able to determine through, again, his review of the apparatus that we have available between Berwyn and Paoli, and essentially push off the potential purchase of a Quint for, another couple of years, while he, again, will determine what we need and where we need it and why we need it.
The only other comment I'll make is what I would like to, I get the comment has been made tonight and at previous meetings, including the one that was, I don't know, a year and a half ago or so, when we discussed the idea of the consultant's report and bringing in a fire administrator and so on and so forth. I would like to see us take a look at some measurables related to the quality of service that we're providing. And so if we're spending a lot of money and we're not able to demonstrate to the residents that the quality of service, response time, whatever it is, hasn't changed, it seems to me that's something that we should monitor before we make commitments for significantly increased staffing, and then we end up saying, well, we have more people, but we're not getting the calls any faster, we're getting there 5 seconds faster or whatever. We're going from 5 minutes to 5 minutes and 5 seconds, and we're spending twice as much money, whatever. I would like to see some connection between the amount of money we're spending and the kind of service level improvement that can be demonstrated and also adds value. I'd like to see that. I know that was still somewhat in the air when the consultant's report was provided last year. That was lacking at that time, and I'm hopeful that the new fire administrator will be able to incorporate that into his presentation as he comes to the community and tells us what the ask is and the increased staffing level, and what I'm hearing is the fire tax is going up in future years. So, thank you.
I can tell you that getting the data organized in a way that is consistent between the fire companies is on his list as a high priority. It wasn't the number one thing to do right yet, but it is number one right now, so he's working on that.
John? I have a question. Since it's public information tonight, can we access the fire administrator's presentation he did at Easttown? And then does it have details that people would want to know? Because I understand it's hard to measure quality as a nurse, a physician, and I know ambulance people are definitely needed. It's not the number of people you save or the number of fires you put out, but it's every life counts. But could we get more sort of information?
I would imagine Easttown probably posts their material, their agenda similar to that we do. I do know.
Associated with the numbers, though, we would need associated.
So working with Joe, I envision kind of getting into a little bit more of the weeds and detail with our board than he probably was with Easttown. Just, anticipating some of the questions that we heard tonight already.
So we can match it with our township.
Yeah, it'll probably be a little bit more detailed, especially given the feedback.
I was going to say, Liz, I appreciate the question. I'm not sure it matters if we get it from, I think having it, the actual Tredyffrin targeted numbers with the fire administrator here to answer the questions is probably the most effective way to get the information to you
Yeah,
guys.
it takes me like 8 times to learn something,
Yeah, well, yeah. But I think when he's here next month, I think that's a better time to get the questions
Yeah,
answered.
I'd like to do the highlights, kind of see what they put up, and then know what we're kind of talking about, and that's all. But I appreciate it.
Yeah, go to Easttown's website. I think they'll have it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Other comments from the public? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve capital expenditure for paving of 1485 Valley Forge Road. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This will be for the 1485, the current Berwyn Fire Company substation. The driveway, we've done many, many patches on it. It's in disrepair. It wasn't really meant for the traffic that it's been on it. What we're proposing is to put 2 inches of blacktop down. The township will only be paying for the material itself. Brubacher Contracting is going to put the material down and compact us for it. We're asking for up to $40,000, which will be a 70-30 split with Easttown. So Tredyffrin's $28,000 and Easttown would be $12,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Hear a second? Second. Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize the capital purchase of an ambulance for emergency services. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, this purchase is to replace an ambulance at Berwyn Fire Company. As I just mentioned, it's not going to pass inspection. It's not fit for use. Total cost of the unit is $221,700, of which we'll be responsible for $155,190. And again, as was mentioned, we're not going to, put a down payment on the Quentin, so we'll use that money for this purchase.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, Mr. Duraco, did you mention it is being purchased through the co-storage program, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. Any public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize the township solicitor to represent the township in a zoning hearing matter for 927 Mount Pleasant Avenue. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will briefly update the board. We have a zoning here, appeal of our zoning officer's decision at a property located at 927 Mount Pleasant involving a student rental housing ordinance. As you know, this is a sensitive issue for the residents of that community as well as our overall ordinance. So we're asking tonight, Ms. McPherson is here as well if you have additional questions. If you have, we're asking tonight for the board to recommend the solicitor participate and represent the township at the zoning hearing board appeal process. Happy to answer any questions.
Do I hear a motion? So, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions?
I have a question. So, what did the zoning hearing board do that we're appealing?
Nothing yet. Go
Oh, they
ahead.
haven't?
Yeah, sorry. When Mr. Martin says the appeal, we call them all appeals. It hasn't actually, there's been no hearing yet. So what they've filed for variances from the terms of the student housing provisions to allow them to have student housing in a location where it would otherwise not be permitted. So what the board is being asked to authorize would be my attendance to oppose that application.
Thank you.
Yeah, essentially there's a distance requirement between the houses.
Yes, that's correct. It at least does not meet that one. I don't know if there's anything else there.
No, it's just the distancing.
right.
They're also applying for a conditional use, or, excuse me, a special exception for the use, which is through the zoning hearing board, but they wouldn't meet the distance requirement.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. McPherson. So that's the reason. I think it's important. This is an important one for us to stand up for. I think this is one that makes a lot of sense to me. Any other board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve a general release for Joseph L. Natali individually and J. L. Natali excavating for payment from escrow account for the preserve at Valley Forge. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This stems from a very old development in the township known as the preserve at Valley Forge. Some time ago, well before I was involved with the township, the developer defaulted on their improvements and their financial security. A subsequent developer took over and hired Mr. Natoli and his excavating company to do some work to actually get them into compliance. The defendant, Apex Constructors, never paid Mr. Natoli, and if you recall, he had long since lobbied the township to utilize the escrow that we had been maintaining for the public improvements pursuant to the financial security agreement to pay what he was owed, which was roughly $30,000 at the time. We are not permitted to do that. We hold escrow to secure the improvements pursuant to the financial security agreement, which are public and quasi-public improvements. So we literally could not do so. We had suggested that if he were to get a tri-party agreement between Natoli and the contractor, the Apex, and the township, whereby Apex was agreeing to release those funds, then we could do so and we would get a release from all the parties. That was the plan, except Mr. Natoli could never get Apex to actually sign or agree to that paperwork. Therefore, he filed a declaratory judgment action, basically alleging all of these things. It was in your materials. He had the defendant served. The defendant never showed up, and so he got a default, essentially, declaratory judgment, which the court issued an order to that effect, now basically permitting the township to release funds that we're holding in escrow. Now that I have a court order, I feel comfortable recommending to the board that we do so. So what we're looking for is there's a general release that Natoli is giving to the township, absolving the township of any liability and agreeing to defend and hold them harmless once we release these funds. Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have the amounts in front of me. There's about $45,000 that we're still holding in escrow. The township will get $5,000 for its legal fees, and the balance will go to Mr. Natoli to pay what he's owed, and I'm sure to pay what his attorney is owed as well.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize advertisement of a public hearing on May 21st, 2025 to consider and possibly adopt an ordinance prohibiting commercial vehicles and trailers on public streets, to be parked on public streets. Chief Beatty.
Apologies, there was a typo or a correction needed to be made when this was first presented last month. We were planning on voting on that, having you vote on that tonight. Unfortunately, in the commercial vehicle definition, we had listed 1 ton, and it will be vehicles in capacity in excess of 4 tons. The final document was reviewed again by the traffic committee, and we'd like to get this moving on to have adopted at the May meeting. Available for any questions.
I do have a question.
Sure. Well, maybe we'll do a motion first. Do I hear a motion? Yeah, we have a motion and a second down here. Okay, board comments? Or?
Yes, my concern on this was, and I think it was last fall, there was an issue with persons who had business, commercial vehicles or trailers. One was like a minivan and the other one was a truck, parking in Mountain View section of Chesterbrook. And apparently the HOA for Mountain View did not allow them to park their vehicles in the actual parking lot there. So they were then parking along Jefferson Road there. So I guess I'm reading that this would prohibit them parking there? No, okay.
Those are private passenger vehicles. So what we did is they put up no parking, basically they pushed the parking away from the entrance to Mountain View. So they have to park a certain distance away from the entrances, and that cleared up the sight lines and seems to have solved that problem.
Thank you.
This is really to address large commercial vehicles parked in. Yeah. Yeah. Any other board comments or questions? Public comments or questions?
Doug Onestad, Tredyffrin. I just have a quick question. So it says, I didn't get a chance to look at the detailed minutes or detailed documentation for the meeting tonight. The actual language, is it literally, I mean, obviously they can park on public streets in general because they just have to stop sometimes. So what's the actual limitation in terms of parking on the public streets?
We're asking, are they allowed to park while they're unloading and loading and providing services?
Anything, like, yeah.
They can park for providing services all they want. Yeah, you can, your lawn guy can park and do his thing, and you just can't leave it there overnight.
What's the actual legal language going to be?
Except while actually loading or unloading and rendering requested service to property owners.
Okay.
So that's accepted out specifically.
And just help me visualize, what is a 4-ton vehicle, what does that equal about in size?
Commercial vehicles, 8,000 pounds would be 4 tons, over 8,000.
Can you describe what a 4-ton, because how much does a typical car weigh? Like, how much does an SUV weigh? Like, I'm trying to get a picture.
8,000 would be a dump truck, F-350 with a dump truck, something like that would be that. Specifically, what this was, the vehicles that were bigger vehicles blocking the roadway, dumpsters, was the focus of this situation for a residential street, pulling up, basically parking overnight in front of somebody's home continually. That's why the ordinance was really first crafted by us brought to us by residents to address their concerns.
Thank you.
The redraft, Doug, was to make it sure it was bigger vehicles. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here.
Thank you.
Turn off the mic. Yeah, thanks. Any other public comments or questions? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize advertisement of a public hearing on May 21st, 2025 to consider and possibly adopt zoning ordinance amendment to allow the age-qualified single-family detached and semi-detached dwellings in the C1 district. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, members of the board. Yeah, we received an application from an applicant. He is here if there are questions, to allow for exactly what you said, single family and twins in the C1 zoning district. So we are looking to schedule the public hearing for that.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any board comments or questions?
Mr. Miller, I just want to make one clarification that Ms. McPherson said it's their age-qualified single family and semi-detached, just for the public. This is, 55 and older community.
Yeah. Russell Road. The Russell Road site is what
Yeah, the specific development was for the Altera project, which was on Russell Road. That was the applicant that came in.
That's the applicant, yeah. Any board comments or questions? Public comments or questions?
Hi, I'm Jeff Hyson. I live on Russell Road, Hyson, Hyson. As I'm sure a number of you know, we went through a very difficult process with the Altera project back in 2018, 2019, 2020. And one of the things that was most frustrating about that was that we were kind of presented with it as a fait accompli, that the zoning was what the zoning was, ALFs had been allowed, as of a change back in, I believe it was 2012, with the zoning that created the possibility for Dalesford Crossing. And then once that proposal went through, there were all sorts of issues of trying to get ourselves heard through the Planning Commission process. This is a case where the developer is asking for not a, as I understand it, it's not a change in the zoning, right? It's a zoning text amendment. In hearing about how this has all come about, though, I'm very frustrated and disappointed, given the history and also the institutional memory represented on the board and among the staff, that the only reason we in the community know that this zoning amendment was going to happen was because the developer was encouraged to reach out to us. Now, as I understand the way this works, there's a development subcommittee of the board, and that subcommittee, along with township staff, hears suggestions or development ideas from developers who would like to potentially develop projects that might ultimately need some kind of either zoning change or adjustments. But as I understand it, that whole process is conducted behind closed doors. And I understand that for efficiency and to promote development, that makes some sense. But then there was no thought, apparently, among the members of the development subcommittee or the members of the staff that, hey, this project that's going into this parcel that caused so much stress and so much frustration and anxiety on the part of the residents on the other side of the Russell Road, maybe we should give them a heads up before this whole potential zoning amendment process starts. There was nothing brought to us at that stage. Then the developer goes to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission, thank God, members of the Planning Commission say, hey, has there been any outreach to the public about this? And the solicitor said, well, it's not a land development plan, so that's not statutorily required. Okay, but it's the right thing to do to let us know that this was going to happen. Now, eventually, as a condition of the Planning Commission forwarding this to you all, the Planning Commission said, hey, let the neighbors know that this potential zoning change is on the way. And we understand that this is the beginning of a long process, that if this were to go through, then we'd come back for the public hearing in May, and then if that went through, then there's the whole planning, the land development process. We know that really well at this point. But I think what I'm trying to convey is a sense of, especially after everything our neighborhood went through, 7 years ago, we really would have appreciated a heads up from all of you rather than from the developer saying, this is a major change that could be potentially happening across the street, and we want to invite you into the conversation as early as possible. I'm glad we were made aware of it by the developer. We certainly plan to be part of the conversation going forward. But I would just ask you to consider whether this might be a process change that you all might need to think about going forward, about whether if a zoning change is being considered, that's something that's alerted, that neighbors are alerted to beforehand and not after the fact. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to,
Go ahead.
I appreciate your comments, and I think there's one part that's very important. We did ask the developer to reach out to you, and that's why we offered him the space here at the Township building. And so it wasn't just at the Planning Commission. They brought that up as a follow-up because he hadn't done it yet, but he wanted to go to the Planning Commission to get some feedback. So I just want to know, we were well aware of the situation. We made sure early on in the process that you're going to have to reach out to the residents. They need to be engaged, which is why this is earlier in the process. He did go to Planning Commission first, but that's why we offered him the space here at the Township building, so we make sure we could do that. But legally, we don't notify from the Township perspective because how far the circle has to be. There's legal requirements of that. That's when we do it and we don't do it. But we always ask the applicants, if there's, especially in this neighborhood, if they're going to impact neighbors, they always reach out to neighbors and they're welcome to use our Township building for those meetings, and that's why they had it here. So I just want to make sure you were clear. We did, from a staff perspective and from the board perspective, make sure that they knew you have to engage the neighbors.
Doug, please turn. No, put the microphone off. Thank you. The only thing I want to add is I was at the meeting with the developer. I spoke to you guys. Like, we did this ahead of this being advertised at this meeting today. So I think you did get pretty fair notice and pretty open discussion from the Township. when it seemed like there was enough to talk about as opposed to, hey, we're thinking about all sorts of stuff, we don't know what's going to happen on the township, on the site yet. So I do think we did try to get you guys included pretty well, and I was at that meeting. I mean, you could have asked me any questions you wanted to. Before the meeting, that's when we had enough of a plan that was worth presenting, was at that meeting. So anyway, thank you for your input, and we'll try to get you involved. We'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Doug Onestad. So again, I didn't get a chance to look at the details for the meeting today. Age qualified, there are different ways of specifying that in code. Sometimes it's targeted and sometimes it is restricted. And is that how
It's restricted.
Perfect, thank you.
It uses the Pennsylvania definition.
Thank you, perfect. In general, I think it's great to encourage age-qualified dwellings. The one thing that I've seen, I'll use the word abused with them, is that the companies that run them don't want to staff them with the medical needs that are sometimes necessary, especially for older dwelling entities. And
keep in mind, these aren't assisted living. These aren't personal care. There's no medical as part of these.
Yeah, I'm just saying in general, I'm saying as a general thing in terms of the language for the code in general.
Right. I just want you to know that that's a licensing requirement. So that's a completely different use than age qualified. That's all.
Yes. I guess first of all, I'm not really making, by the way, I'm not making comments on this specific proposal. I had the question, but I don't have any comments on it. I do have comments on the housing in general and the zoning and planning that goes with it, because that's come up a couple times tonight. One thing I would suggest is that you do not wait for the comprehensive plan to start looking in depth at your planning and zoning, because I think there's a lot of ways today that you can improve it to help the commercial side. Our parking sometimes is overly restricted for certain things in planning. That you can ease up on the office space by allowing commercial on the bottom level. There's lots of things you can do to make it more palatable instead of just always converting things to residential. And I think it might be prudent to start really focusing on what you can do to make that better for the office and commercial that's in Tredyffrin today, and not having to keep coming back with one fails after the other and saying, oh, we need to make more residents. So I'd like to really see a real effort on that to overhaul some of our code to make it more business friendly.
Mr. Onestad. Any other public comment?
Found my pen. Just a couple of questions here. The proposed ordinance here requires that the tract does not have frontage along a major arterial highway. So presumably rearage is okay. I mean, it would be right next to Route 30. Is that a major arterial highway?
Yeah, it would be, but it's separated.
The rear. Oh, but the railroad?
That would be separate. It's not adjacent to Route 30 because you have the railroad and then also additional parcels on the other side. So it wouldn't even be in the rear
Okay.
on 30.
I kind of figured that there was obviously some way around that. So there's the C1 district goes all the way along Lancaster Road, and there's a nice little parcel on Howellville that's been the subject of other development proposals. How does this ordinance change impact what might happen to that lot on Howellville, for example?
That also would be one of the properties that could possibly use this ordinance. Again, this would be for all C1. It's not specific to the property on Russell, but they have to meet all the qualifications.
The interesting thing about this, unlike the first one, the first hearing, which was conditional use, this basically gives anybody the right. And that seems to be, given the history of this lot, like giving someone a right rather than having a layer of approval, seems like very extreme. Any comments on why we're going straight to by right?
The applicant, again, this was a petition submitted to the township by the applicant, so that's the way that they
Has there been any discussion
I mean,
as to
we
whether
could-
we're okay with that?
I think we did, I'm trying to think in the subcommittee if we talked about conditional use versus permitted use. I don't know that we did specifically.
I don't think there was any objection on the committee level, but we didn't have we only have 3 members of the board, so it may be something that other members want or don't.
Just
so.
given the history and what we're hearing, it seems that the more review by the board might be appropriate. And who enforces the restrictions? How do we know that there's no occupancy by any person age 18 or younger, for example? How do we know that?
Probably the HOA, but the township can get involved as well and require proof of that.
So that would come under Aaron?
Correct.
Correct, it would be a code enforcement under me. Yep.
That would be a pretty significant addition to your workload, I would think, to know who's living in these apartments, in these buildings.
Well, this particular proposal is only 18 units.
Okay. Of course, there's no discussion of that in the ordinance.
Correct, because it's not specific to the development.
Unlike the previous developer who was like totally overboard with the information he provided, it seems that this is still very open to interpretation here. Okay, that's all. And I would just encourage you to think about conditional use.
Thank you.
Is that on? Great. Hi, Juliet Heisen. And actually, that question came up at the resident meeting last week, so thank you for raising that again. You spoke to that. I just have a quick question about how you're going to advertise this. We all who live on Russell Road did get a letter from the developer raising awareness that this was coming up. Are you going to be informing all properties that might be adjacent to C1 zones that this ordinance might be changing? I just don't know how you advertise that.
No, so that's for when we have a conditional use hearing or a zoning hearing or land development, there are mailed notices that are required.
Okay.
For a zoning text amendment, it gets advertised in the newspapers, and that's the notice. It also gets posted on the property.
On the Russell Road property?
Correct.
Okay, but so other C1 adjacent residential areas wouldn't necessarily know that this was happening if they don't pass the Russell Road location?
They may or may not. I'm telling you that's what is required by the municipality's planning code and by the township ordinance.
I understand. Well, I might encourage you to somehow raise awareness so that we just feel like we went through this 7 years ago and we didn't know that things were changing that affected, our community. And I think it would I just don't want other residents of the township to be in the same kind of situation that we were in 7 or 8 years ago. So, thank you.
I think that's a good point. No, thank you. I think that's a reasonable point.
Neil Newman, Russell Road, and I think a lot of us have a problem with the fact, with the amendment versus the variance concept. It's going to come up I think each situation is different. For example, when I first moved in, it's 30 years, you could go out to 252 and maybe make a left at rush hour, but now you can never make a left. And now it's hard to even make a right with all the new houses. And if you think of if you put they could probably put 4 single-family homes, 8 more cars in the neighborhood. 18 units is 36 more people driving in and out. So again, I know you're saying, well, that's life, you have to live with it. But it's just a point that the location makes a difference. Not all C1s are the same. We only have one street, and you got to get out one way or the other. There's no cross streets. It's not like a grid system and you have alternate routes. So I think that the over 55, type of HOA living is a good thing for that location, but I think 18 units is a bit over the top. I think the greed of the developers and the blind eye and turned ears of the people that run the township, I think, there's got to be a compromise. You can't just squeeze, every square inch of the township into a way to make money. Sometimes a nice place to live, I think a lot of us would be willing to pay a little more taxes if we just, stop being pro-development all the time. I know you're trying to tell us you're saving us money. Commercial property keeps your school district taxes down, and I'm happy that this is going to be over 55, because that does that. But, we got to think about the logistics of how the traffic on the street, it's just getting worse and worse. Thank you.
I'll just mention that I'm not on the development committee now, but I was previously, and we have had so many ideas come for this area that we have just flat out rejected. So we have been very thoughtful on the early stages when things are kind of just floating around. So we're not just pro all development. We're trying to be very thoughtful about it.
I had a question about the traffic load. I know you're stating that if these are developed into homes, there could potentially be 36 more cars. But what was the traffic load when those buildings were operating as businesses? I mean, the parking lots will hold that many.
That was the point. Then it was a little difficult during rush hour, but they were working.
You need to come to the microphone for those at home. Thank you.
So you knew, don't try to make a left turn on 252 during, afternoon rush hour. But now it can be any time, including a Sunday afternoon. I guess things have changed. People work from home and they might run out during the day. But it's just because there's so many more houses in the neighborhood. The commercial, it seemed, I don't know why, but it seemed better then when it was commercial. Probably because it was only between, the certain 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. But, and you knew, okay, well, don't go out there at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. But now you really can't do it anytime. Like I said, even on a Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's tough to get out of Maple Avenue it certainly can't make a left turn, and you're lucky sometimes. You might have to wait a long time to even make a right turn. It's definitely worse. I think anyone in the neighborhood will say that it's worse now, even though there's no commercial buildings down there than there was when they were open. Now, I think it might have to do with more people in the area in general, and they use it as a cut-through. But like I said, if they put in 4 houses, that's 8 more cars, 18 units, 36 more cars, and that much more, runoff and sewage too. But,
thank you.
okay.
Yeah, thanks. Any other board comments or questions? Good.
Good evening. My name is Ivo Jansen. I too live on Russell Road. One thing I'm confused about is if a developer wants to do something within a certain zoning district, is that what it's called? Why does the entire ordinance for that zone need to be changed? Why wouldn't the developer request a variance? It seems to me that a zoning ordinance is really a statement of philosophy or whatever it is by the township about how they would like to see development in the town as a whole take place. If it is just a single developer focusing on a specific property, why does that entire philosophy or belief about development in the township need to change?
So I can take that a little bit, yeah. So yeah, you are correct. You could apply for a variance, right? Any use variance. I will say that use variances are a little bit harder, and like Ms. Goss. Harder to get than a dimensional variance, because you kind of have to prove that none of the other uses work for that property. So it's just a little bit more, I guess, tedious for the applicant.
So you're trying to accommodate the developer?
Well, no, what I was going to say was when we, like Ms. Gossi said, we've had many, different applicants that have come through for this property. And some of the times it was, well, the board doesn't want to make a change.
Right.
If you want to, go and try to get a variance, that would be up to you. Anyone is eligible to get a variance from any provision of the zoning hearing board or from the zoning ordinance. I guess when this applicant came in, the subcommittee kind of looked at it and felt that it does kind of meet the character of the neighborhood, and it made more sense than some of the other applications that came through. And this sort of the ordinance portion gives, in a way, the power to make that change to the board. Right, so the board now is going to say that that is an appropriate use for C1 based on the criteria that are required, the frontage and all the things, other things in the ordinance, that we did look at.
So does the board then indeed agree with the developer that this is a good change to make?
Again, that was the subcommittee, so that's only a small portion. The people that were on the subcommittee felt that this would be something that we could look to move forward. Again, the whole board's going to have to make the decision. This hasn't even really been discussed until today with the full board. So
I don't know the governance structure here, but is the subcommittee here or? Yeah. And so the subcommittee, so how many folks are on the subcommittee?
3 people on the subcommittee.
We think are here on the board. And staff. And would you mind sharing why you think this is a good idea, or at least a good idea to consider instead of a variance?
I'm happy to do that real quick.
Yeah.
As was said here before, tons of developers have come through here. I'm not exaggerating, over a number of years since, and I was on this board during that period through the troubled times. And I was on this board then. So I commiserate with you. I understand what you're saying. So we looked at a lot, not that we are the know-all, be-all, and end-all. We're a subcommittee.
Yeah.
And we knew, but we're on that subcommittee because we would have a sense of which may or may not get even looked at by this board or by staff. And they were nixed. So we find and we talk to the developer of this, and then that developer comes in with so many units, and I on myself say, ain't no way, that's not happening. It's not happening, it's not happening with that design. So it comes back down to 18, and it again, age restricted, and a series of conditions here, and I'm going to say this, and although it's not conditional use as the other one, the conditions here are rigorous. I mean, that have to be complied with to develop this property or property in a C1 anywhere else in the township. And before we even look at this and approve this, we say, where can this be done again, or how can it really be done somewhere else? And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong. But you being us, we try to be right. So we took everything in, and we didn't say, and we also put into the equation, and I'm going to go a little far out here. What was there when they tried to Altera tried to do what they tried to do, and what's still there now is something that's deteriorating and is getting worse. And there would soon be, there'd soon be fences up, and it wouldn't be good for anyone. So when we saw somebody come in here willing to live with these restrictions, and in a good faith come with a decent product at a high price, we said, let's open it up and, take it to the rest of the board and see what people, think about it. And that's what we're doing here tonight, and that's what would happen again at the public hearing if the board so chooses. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't part of the subcommittee, and I was not on the board when, as Murph just said, the troubles happened. So I'm like the newcomer hearing all of this. I'm understanding what is being said here. I'm understanding what most of you all have got up and said, that it seems as though what I'm picking up, and you may be able to tell me or other, that you're feeling that if this C1 change happens the way, it's going to open up the floodgates for everybody else? Is that what we're picking up on?
Well, that could happen.
Is that the consensus?
So that could happen, right? That's something that happened in 2012 when this C1 zoning ordinance was changed to allow ALFs. That got us into trouble. And I'm not even specifically talking about the property across the street. It just, to me, seems odd that a developer would appeal to the board for a change in the zoning ordinance when they're just thinking about one property. I'm interested in hearing what the board has to say, because it is the entire township that you need to be thinking about. That developer just thinks about that one property, unless there's other stuff going on that we don't know about. I don't know.
Sir, I'm on the subcommittee as well.
Yeah.
And as I've established before, I'm very, very cautious about any development in this township. I've seen its negative impacts and the concerns residents have. So we laser focus in on this project. And one thing I'd like to address is the fact that, it does not have frontage, the zoning text amendment does not have frontage along a major arterial highway as defined in the township's comprehensive plan. This is C1. When you put those restrictions together, you're dealing with a handful of properties in the township.
No,
so it's just so that that's where I'm focused on. It's this is really tattooed to one spot. Just as Supervisor Wysocki said, we looked at what has been there, what could be there. And again, when we're in the development subcommittee, I just want what is palatable to present to the community. I mean, we do a lot of swatting of bad ideas. This is a presentable idea of 18 units of $1.4 to $1.5 million age-restricted townhomes that people probably will live at half the time. They're not down in Florida. And it's going to have landscaping all along Russell Road. You're not going to see the properties. They're going to have a view of the train. These are the things that go into our minds and what we're thinking. You're asking what we're thinking. So this is, all right, so we're getting a bad rateable. It's going down in tax value. That is a minor concern of mine personally, but that's something to consider. So putting all this together, and I shrugged my shoulders darn it, this is another one in 100 good projects that really makes sense for the township to present to the people to then hear your views. So that's where I'm coming from.
And so I may very well agree with that being a great project for the area. If it is indeed the case that it's really just a handful of properties around the township that would be affected by the zoning ordinance change, then I would really encourage you to reach out to all the adjacent property owners to make them aware of that change so that they can assess whether that is also in their best interest. Because I do think it is important that the public can attend that hearing and hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, we heard this idea before. I think it makes sense. I mean, I think I said it, a while ago that this idea makes sense to advertise to the other residents, try to do something to reach out to them so they know the change being made. There's a very limited number of properties this applies to. I mean, and we can.
It makes it all the easier to do that, right? To reach out to them directly. So, thank you very much.
I do have one comment to add, which is, I will not be here at the May 21st meeting, but, a derelict office building doesn't really do anything good for the township, doesn't do anything good for the residents, it brings down property values and so on. Now, I don't know whether 18 units is the right number, or whether 16 units is the right number, or 20 units is the right number. Again, that's something that I think we go through the the planning process, but I do think that it's a legitimate use of the property. And I do have one request for anyone who will be attending the meeting next month, including the developer, which is that property has a number of beautiful trees on it, old, mature trees, so please try and save them.
Thank you.
I was just looking on my map program, the satellite view of Russell Road, and I noticed that there are some commercial buildings and there are a lot of residential-looking buildings, and as Supervisor Basker alluded to, numbers of mature trees, which are good for stormwater management. I'm wondering, since this is a commercial building, a commercial zone, what kinds of other uses could these properties be put to that would not have to go through this kind of an argument? And I think it's an important question because the people who live in the neighborhood have to decide what kind of a neighborhood they want. If this ordinance if this particular thing is defeated, it means that the space, whatever space the developer is considering, is available for some other use, which may not be a desirable use for the neighborhood. For example, there's a construction company who can probably park huge trucks. They could drive big trucks back and forth in front of your house with noise and what have you. Smell, air pollution, everything else. What other kinds of uses can be put into this area that will not require a zoning change?
Anything that's permitted in C1.
I can run down the list if you want. Permitted uses, you could have a bank or other financial institution, a club or a lodge, a daycare, a fraternity or sorority house, a health club, a manufacturer, representative or catalog order sales, medical dental office, an office, outdoor seating, well, I guess that's specific to a restaurant, a park, a parking structure, or a personal service establishment, retail store, restaurant. And then there's also a couple of uses that require a special exception, which needs to be approved by the zoning hearing board, but is generally permissible in the area. So that could also be a vet clinic, a parking lot as a primary use, a mortuary, government or public utility use, a business or a private school, a bed and breakfast, or an amusement facility indoor. Those are the uses.
That's quite an assortment of things.
No one, and Mr. Coonan, no one's come to us with any of those ideas.
I'm sorry?
No one has come to us with any of those ideas.
All right, but it doesn't mean no one will. You see, I keep saying, I've said it before, and I will say again now, and I will say in the future, that you have to plan for the future. That's why you do a comprehensive plan every 5 years. Now, what the people, the neighbors have to think about is, do they want an indoor amusement park? Do they want can't even say it, a fraternity or a sorority house? Do they want any other kind of retail business? Now look around the area and look at the number of empty retail businesses. I don't want an empty retail business across the street from me. And I can't imagine that anybody sitting here at this time would. At the same time, I also recognize, looking at the image that I did just now of Russell Road, I'm not sure that townhouses really are a good aesthetic fit with the neighborhood. But it's a choice that people have to make. Now, if they defeat this project, something else will come along that will be put there. And you can't say that it won't happen, because it does happen. It's like, the Titanic didn't sink, okay? We know that, it's true. The Titanic never sank. It's a hoax, it's baloney. And this is the way people, we cannot think about our neighborhoods this way. We have to think about what could happen, under the current circumstances? Is the change worth making to prevent the kinds of things that could happen, even though we don't know that they will? And that's the important part, the don't know that we will. We don't know. And we have a tendency to ignore the things we don't know. It's human nature, it's that. And this is what, as somebody who does this kind of stuff for a hobby, I'm going to say, this is what the neighbors have to think. What is it they want? What is their vision for the neighborhood? You have created a vision for the neighborhood by creating a 5-year comprehensive plan, by passing zoning ordinances, and as someone who preceded me said, it's a matter of, what did he say? I can't remember, philosophical view of what the township should be. I'm sorry, I just wish I could remember the exact terminology. It was good. But these are the kinds of things that we all have to think about. What can happen, what could happen, even if we think it's improbable, it probably will anyway. Okay? These are the choices that we have, and this is what people have to think about. Please think carefully about what you protest, think carefully about what you approve, and we have a problem with the development subcommittee because we know that there are supervisors on that committee. We know that the developer comes to the development subcommittee and says, here's my plan, how can I make it acceptable to the township? And you discuss it. And then the supervisors have approved, in effect, preliminary to everything else. They have, in effect, approved the plan that the developer is presenting. And then how can they say no afterward? It's a very difficult situation. I would suggest that perhaps those supervisors who are on the development subcommittee abstain from any conversation regarding whether or not the idea should be passed as long as it's in public. While it's in public. At this point, if you were on that subcommittee, you should not be speaking. You should not be voting on it. Because in effect, you already have, and you get 2 votes. You get a vote in the subcommittee, and you get a vote here in the DS.
Thanks, Mr. Coonan. I appreciate your view. We're getting asked direct questions about how we thought about this.
I'm sorry?
We're getting direct questions from residents about how we thought about this development.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yes,
think we
I
have an
understand.
obligation to answer those questions.
I'm sorry?
We have an obligation to answer those questions.
I understand.
To answer your one question you had, which is what's our vision of this neighborhood? I mean, it's a residential neighborhood on one side, and our vision is to continue that residential feel on the other side of the road with something like this development. That's how we got to here.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, it's a matter of deciding what people want, how to preserve what they like about the situation. We understand that things do change. There's a lot of stuff involved. And I hope I made my point about who's voting for what and what people have to think about. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think there's one point that is being missed, which is that, the residents, of course, want some nice houses, some trees, something that keeps the neighborhood as it is. I mean, that's reasonable. I don't want a glue factory moving in next door to my house. But on the other hand, if you do have some derelict office buildings there, those derelict office buildings aren't doing anyone any good. And the residents may not want a glue factory moving in or something like that, but ultimately, it's not just what the residents want. Someone has to come in and say, it's worthwhile for me to develop this property, because if no one comes in and says it's worthwhile for me to develop the property, it's going to continue being derelict. And a derelict property that's a year later is going to be a worse derelict property. So ultimately, it's one of those things where you can wait for an infinite amount of time for the perfect opportunity to come along, or you can say, we've seen these opportunities, this is a good one, this is how we're going to move forward. So ultimately, there is a compromise involved. Now, I'm not on the planning committee, but I think that is a reasonable way to move forward by making reasonable compromises.
Thank you, Supervisor Bhaskar.
One thing we know about this ordinance changing process is that once it gets advertised, that's locked in. And then in May the 21st, you will vote either to approve it or not. The only chance for the public to have comment is now. So you've had some suggestions about different ways of looking at it. Is there any commitment to understand conditional use or special exception or anything different about the ordinance other than what was published here?
Clark, may I just say something in response to what you just said? And I'm paraphrasing your words. You said the public has no other voice. That's why they call it a public hearing. And you're right, it is locked in. That's good that it's locked in up to the public hearing. Because when the folks come to the public hearing, those are the words. Those are the words you're discussing.
But you're not
in that advertising, I know, Ray, you're going to, but I just want that to be clear too. I'm not saying that we're going to not do anything because we spent a lot of time coming to what this is, and I don't believe the developer is here tonight. I don't know. He's here.
He is here.
I mean, by all accounts.
Hey, I didn't see you there over Charlie.
Can I say something real quick? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, okay, let me finish. But, I mean, Ray, I understand your point. You're saying once it's locked in because it's advertised, it's not a horrible thing because you know what? The voice is still out there. It could, and people, we've been in situations in my 12 years here where at a public hearing, things are rejected. Things are reworked. Yes, you have to re-advertise and that costs money, but the people have not lost their voice. They have their voice throughout the process because it's then would be going back to the project itself, if it went that far, would be going back to the Planning Commission for land development, where it could be attacked again. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, it's not like the people are absolutely losing their voice. I take umbrage at that.
No.
Right,
We have a voice tonight. We do.
Ray, look at the one right above it, P, where we actually advertised it, pulled it back, we listened to changes people proposed at the microphone, and then re-advertised it. Like has happened. So I have notes from what I just heard here tonight. I need to digest what we just heard. I'm not sure what we're going to do exactly. We're probably going to vote to
I was just looking for digestion.
But we have one right above it. The one right before it went through this process twice. So we do listen and make changes.
Right. And I was just looking to hear somebody say that. So thank you.
You've seen it in action. We did it. Just, an hour ago at this point probably, but yeah. Any other public comment on this one? Yeah, that's good. Mr. Kuhn, let's let Mr. Kuhn, can we have the developer speak, please?
Just very quickly.
Just send him the typos.
Turn on the mic, please.
I know I cause that. I do that all the time. It's a personality quirk. I'm sorry. Page 2, up at the top. If there is more than 2 age-qualified single-family, should be R. Simple thing, just a word, but it's reasonable and it makes it sound like people are literate. Down here on the bottom, where it says notwithstanding any other requirement members of a household. What's a requirement member? There needs to be a comma following requirement. It changes the meaning of the sentence and it makes it clear, concise, and understandable. And that's why we have to point these things out. Because when the Congress wanted to change the Obamacare Act, what they did first was they changed the punctuation to change the connections of ideas, and it separated things that had been connected. That's why we do this. And these are things that I happen to notice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, we have the developer's going to come up and speak.
Thank you. Charlie Hatter, I'm with Haverford Development Partners. I'm the developer, proposed developer of the project. I just wanted to say in a public forum, because obviously it's been an important part of the discussion tonight, about the neighbor meetings. So we had a neighbor meeting on April 15th in the community room. There is another neighbor meeting on the 23rd, on Wednesday at 7 p.m. So I just wanted to broadcast that to whoever's watching, just to make sure people knew about that. There were a lot of really good comments that came out of the last discussion. I would imagine that there'll be more on the 23rd. Those are all things that may not, as a developer, may not go into the text amendment, but there's certainly things that will go into the land development. All the things to consider about landscaping, trees, driveway conditions, all of those things. So I just wanted to get that out there, that we have the meeting scheduled for the 23rd, 7 p.m. In the community room. And then I've also made as many neighbors aware as possible that if they can't make these meetings because they have child commitments or personal commitments, I'm happy to meet with folks individually on their time, before work, after work, whenever it suits them. So I just wanted to make sure I broadcasted the meeting on the 23rd as widely as I could. And happy to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just turn off the mic. Any other board comments or questions? Public comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we go to new matters. Any board member new matters?
Sure. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had originally placed on the agenda a motion requesting Finance Director Joe DiRocco to provide some additional data as part of the 2026 budget process. So in addition to drafting a traditional budget, the motion would have requested him to forecast what the budget would look like if, while keeping expenditures the same, we remove the stormwater and emergency services fees and replace them with a 0.5% EIT. It was simply a request for him to provide information in order for the residents and the supervisors to have a more educated discussion as part of the 2026 budget process in the fall. I withdrew it when it became clear to me that the motion lacked a majority vote, even to request the data. So today we sacrifice information on the altar of numerophobia and choose and pledge fealty to ignorance. Thank you.
I just want to make a statement to Steve over there. I've been riding past Stratford Park, and I've looked at all the work that you guys have done as far as the stormwater and repaving and all of that, and I just want to say it looks really, really nice. I came past when it rained. I didn't see any water floating anywhere, so I just want to say congratulations and thank you for doing an excellent job on that.
Another board member new matters?
Yeah, but just real quickly, because all this discussion about notice, I would like us to take a look, and we can talk with this offline, about what additional measures we can adopt locally rather than just following the minimum requirements for any conditional use land development notices to residents. I don't know if other townships have adopted additional notice requirements beyond what is legally minimally required.
So
I'd be curious to look into that.
Let me just tell you, I'm not sure if you're talking about zoning amendment or the hearing process.
Land development.
Okay.
Just
So
more
land
or less-
development's a little bit different. Believe it or not, under the MPC, it doesn't even provide that you are required to give notice of conditional use hearings. It says that you are to provide whatever notice the township deems to be given. So it's a little different. Some municipalities that I represent, they will have only the adjacent property owners. Anybody who touches the property gets notice. Some have 250 feet. Some have 500 feet in every direction. Some have 500 feet on the street and 250 feet on other streets. There's no one way. I think what we do is, at least for the hearing perspective, is 500 feet in all directions around the property. for, if it's a zoning hearing or conditional use. I don't recall what the land development notice is, because I'm not a part of that typically.
It's also 500.
500
We use the
feet as
same,
well.
500 feet.
Yeah, which is not
What would be
But,
helpful
yeah,
for
not
me,
required.
not the expert, is perhaps, maybe we have one, is an Excel spreadsheet showing exactly what notice is provided for under what conditions, and we see that, and then perhaps have recommendations of how to improve that, so, or not improve it if it's enough, but just have a discussion about it. I think that could all be helpful for everybody involved. So I have better understanding, supervisors have better understanding, and the residents have a better understanding of what those requirements are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment? New business, I'm sorry.
You're required to send notices of the board meetings 24 hours in advance of the meeting, as I understand legally. The meetings are on Mondays. I'm very happy that Secretary Hoffman sends the meeting notices out on Friday. That's more than 24 hours. And that's really good. That's the kind of thing that has to happen. And you're right, Mr. Holt, you're right, Supervisor Holt, you're absolutely right. What I would suggest is this. Email is free. It doesn't cost the township anything that I know of to send the meeting information for the Board of Supervisors with all of those 127,000 pages of attachments that go with it, all of the background information and everything. That's wonderful, it's excellent, and I compliment you on that. I would suggest that just like those meetings, these meetings, zoning meetings, public, what do you call them, planning commission meetings, that you simply give people an opportunity to sign up for notices. And you simply say, we have a proposal for a development at this particular location.
We do, right?
We already have that.
Yeah, we have that. Yeah,
There's
we
a
have that.
distribution list. Anyone that wants to be on a distribution list, we send out the agendas for the board, the planning commission, the zoning hearing board. They're all separate lists. So if you want to be a member or be on the distribution list, you could always send an email to me or Tredyffrin at tredyffrin.org, and we'll put you on the list.
Okay, I hope everybody heard that. I understand that. I know I agree. I get those notices through Trout Creek Watershed, okay? But what I'm saying is that those things that Aaron detailed have already gone through a considerable amount of process. Is there a way when someone sends a permit request, turns in a permit application to the township, that could be put on an email, on a list, and simply sent out to the township? I don't see any harm in that. It doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. It sounds like a good idea. Someone would just have to, when you type in to the computer the information about the permit, you just push a button that says connect to the township email distribution list, just like you do with this meeting and the other meetings that Aaron outlined. It sounds like we have so much of this technological stuff around. I don't think we're making sufficient use of it. I think we can figure out how to do it.
I think we get the message that you want more information sent out there. Let us talk internally about what.
Not just that list. This project has already gone through a considerable process. We know that because the developer alluded to meetings that he's had. You've talked about meetings that you've had with the developer. All kinds of things have happened, and ultimately it comes out in public. What I'm saying is notify the public of the event before the fact, not after the fact. When you are, if I was a developer and I sent you a permit request to build a housing development at particular location, that is the moment that you tell the township that the application has arrived. That's when you tell it, not after it's gone to the development subcommittee and you've gotten all mixed up in all kinds of comments and discussions and told the developer how he can get his thing passed. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to tell people immediately so that the people are aware and that they are ready. Just like sending an agenda of a meeting out before the fact of the meeting, it gives the recipients an opportunity to think about the contents of the agenda.
So we send out, Aaron, let's talk about building permits?
No, we do not send out notice for building permits.
No, you don't, you don't, but you should. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Do it.
We have thousands of building permits that happen every day.
We're not.
Every month, I should say.
Well, at least you can send out, you can put them on a database and you could tell people how to access
All
it.
right, Mr. Kuhn, we have other people to talk. I understand your desire for more information. Let us think about what we can and can't do here, all right? We're not going to solve this problem in front of you here today.
Well, it's not a matter of...
I understand the issue. I think we get the issue. You want us to send out more information.
I want you to send out all the information.
I'm not sure what all the information is here.
You're not. If all of the information starts with the first time a person says, I want to do this. That's the beginning of the information. He wants to do it so people can react immediately. And people, people can...
Mr. Kuhn, thank you. I think we're done. I understand what
I'm
you're
not
asking
done.
for.
I'm never done, you know that.
Well, I think we're done for tonight, so thank you. I'm serious.
Well, I hope...
Mr. Kuhn, I'm serious now. Please, sit down.
Okay. I feel like I'm being deprived of my rights, but that's okay.
That's fine.
It's all right.
You might be. Thank you.
That's okay.
Let's let Doug talk now, please.
And you know I have a good sense of humor, so we'll be okay. But something has to be done to make this whole process hopelessly transparent right from the beginning. That's all.
Doug Honest, Tredyffrin. So I just wanted to talk about the EIT proposal that was removed and give some suggestions to the board on how to think about this topic going forward. So there are a number of pros and cons to replacing millage rate with millage rate property taxes with an EIT. I have not seen the board have those conversations about the pros and cons, because there are pros and cons to that. And part of that conversation should be underneath what criteria should the board know what the best path for Tredyffrin is in terms of an EIT once you analyze those pros and cons. There's pros and cons in terms of people retired, impacted business, things like that. And I would suggest that the board have a series of conversations on the policy impact of a EIT before moving forward with one. There has been due diligence on the board in regards to how much money EIT would bring in from previous studies. But I have not seen any due diligence on how an EIT would impact businesses and their desire to be in Tredyffrin. I think this is a critical and necessary step that should happen, again, before moving forward. The 0.5% EIT that was in the initial proposal does not match the amount of, the term fees, but I'll use that term loosely, the fees removed from the budget. It's actually a lot more, bringing a lot more revenue than that. Therefore, this is really a large tax increase if you just do that difference, if you do a 0.5% with the removing of the fees. So I'm not sure where that 0.5% is coming from, or if you're planning on also reducing the millage rate beyond those two air quote fees. Another thing to contemplate, and this is actually really important because this is going to come up. Now that Easttown has passed an EIT, the school board is going to come and ask to collect half of it, of your EIT. I know that in the past you've had legal advice given that you don't have to because of the charter rule and things like that. However, they will come and ask for it, independent of whatever advice you've been given. If you refuse, I am sure they're going to sue you for the money. Basically guaranteed. If that happens, are you going to fight them in a prolonged legal battle? Or are you going to raise that to actually 1% in order to get your 0.5%? Or are you going to give them half of a percent? This is something that you really have to decide as a board how you're going to handle this before it even happens, because they will come for your half. If the board does give them half, the school district by law is supposed to make it revenue neutral. Anyone who has followed the school board for any length of time knows that our McDonald is not truthful with the numbers for the finances of TU School District, and it will not be revenue neutral for them, and will result in even a bigger tax increase. So again, there are pros and cons of the EIT. There are definitely benefits to it, but I would advise you to look at those other things first before pushing forward with it, perhaps forming a non-biased committee on it to approach this topic. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Aristad. Now, I don't know if you're making general comments or if you're talking specifically about what I had requested in the agenda. Now, obviously, if you're making general comments, I agree that there ought to be careful consideration and about the legalities, about the amounts and all of that. Now, all I had done, if you read the earlier draft, was ask for a certain specific small amount of data. Now, it turns out that there's not support on the board even for providing that small amount of data to the supervisor. So that's really all I have to say. I think we ought to have a good discussion about the EIT and all of the points that you're making. But right now, without even the seed data that I asked for, I fail to see how we can even have that discussion.
I assume the numbers you're referring to would be the financial impact of adding that while removing the 2 emergency service fees, correct? You already basically have that number because not too long ago, there was an analysis done on having an EIT in Tredyffrin because of the fact that companies have to file all their employees because for that. We know what that number is. So I'm a little bit confused what you're looking for. We know what that number would be within very small variance. We know what that number would be. We know what your numbers are for the stormwater emergency service fees. Well, they're really not fees, but the money you put towards stormwater emergency services, you know what those numbers are. So you already kind of know what those numbers are. So I'm kind of confused what you're literally looking for then.
So that project, which was done a couple of years ago, was done as a side project rather than front and center as part of the budget process, as you yourself said a few minutes ago. So what I was trying to do is get that information into the budget process so that the front and center, so that the residents could see it for themselves as what it would do to the budget, and the supervisors could also look at it and see what it would do to the budget. But my point is merely today is just asking for information evidently was incorrect.
Can I speak to that, Bhaskar? Because I think you've said it a couple of times tonight, and what you're saying is just simply not the truth. I mean, your proposal was a $10 million tax increase. Can I finish, please? Can I finish? I read the proposal. You wanted us to budget a $10 million tax increase. It was a 66% increase. A 0.5% EIT is a $15 million in revenue. Our current total property tax bill is $15.5 million. By deleting the stormwater tax and the emergency services tax, that's about $5.5 million-ish. Adding $15 million of revenue from an EIT at 0.5%, that's $25 million in tax revenue, when right now we get 15. It's a $10 million increase. There was nothing included as to why we needed the money, what we were going to do with it, or what was wrong with the emergency services tax or the stormwater tax. So it was obviously difficult for anybody to vote to support that. And right now, the township hasn't demonstrated a need for the money. Our general fund reserves have gone up from $16.4 million in 2021 to $18.2 million in 2024. So we're increasing our reserves. It's not as if there's a financial problem with the township right now. EIT, go ahead, yeah, EIT isn't going to solve our retirees' problem. I mean, out of a hypothetical $10,000 tax bill, $1,100 is the township, $1,300 is the county, and $7,600 is the school district. So of that $1,100, about $300 is this tax, which is the emergency services tax and stormwater tax.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I should have made myself clear. What I was asking for was not a discussion about EIT. It was a discussion about asking for information about the impact if we did a certain thing as an option on the budget. I said, basically do the straight budget. I said, give me some numbers. I did not say, give me an EIT. I did not say pass an EIT. All I did was ask for some numbers.
What numbers were they?
I said basically, if when doing the budget, you do the budget just the regular way, you hold the expenditures the same, and then just tell me what the impact on the budget is if you impose a 0.5% EIT and you eliminate the stormwater and the emergency services fees. So I just asked for those numbers.
I think we have them. It's a $10 million tax increase.
I'm not talking.
Good evening, Dan Klein, KLEIN, live on Mountain View Drive. Wanted to talk about the EIT, the potential EIT proposal. So I heard a rumor that it was on the agenda tonight and then it was off the agenda. And since removed, I'm happy to hear that because as Supervisor Miller pointed out, we have ample reserves, we're well funded, we have actually a plethora of different tax revenue that fund the township, and I think that is really good that we have that variety, in fact, and instead of eliminating potential options or raising or lowering things here and there, I think things are working out pretty well. If to your point, Supervisor Miller, about the general fund balance, or was the reserve fund balance. Anyway, I would say, given the plethora of different taxes that the township itself levies, I don't see any reason for any new taxes to be imposed. It just, to the point that Doug Onestad brought up before, there's all kinds of potential litigation that could be involved with the school district. And frankly, I don't think any of us want any more taxes. We know how much we're already paying in taxes. We support the taxes that we pay. There's no question about that. Then the question is, okay, well, why are we looking for more revenue sources if we're well-funded? We have an excellent rating with Moody's, to the best of my knowledge. And so it really doesn't make sense. I think, though, it does make sense if we're in a situation where we're facing a potential revenue shortfall, let's study the different options available. Let's not exclude it, or let's not include or exclude certain potential revenue sources. EIT can be one of them. I think it makes sense to study it broadly. But to simply focus on the EIT, I think is wrong-headed. And again, I'm not opposed to the EIT itself. I just think we need to say, okay, well, why are we asking for this to begin with? What is causing us concern? Anyway, no. So I do appreciate that the township would undergo a periodic review of revenue sources and different taxes and fees that we can levy, and that we do that on an ongoing basis, that this isn't just a point-in-time thing, or we don't end up in an emergency situation where, oh my gosh, we have just this big revenue shortfall, right? Like, we'll do that on a periodic basis, but to simply call out the EIT as the savior of a potential budget shortfall, which frankly doesn't exist, I think is wrong-headed. And I think it's also important to know, as a working person, my wife also works, we can't be the only ones carrying the burden of the township's expanding revenue needs. We need to look broadly, and I think that's sort of the theme of my comments. As we know, there's plenty of other options, including property taxes, which we can study before being proposed and implemented. So I just would encourage the board to be thoughtful about additional taxes, additional revenue sources, and not just consider one over the other. EIT isn't the only thing, right? We have plenty of other options, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just point out that that's exactly what we did when we knew we had to raise more money for stormwater management several years ago, and we did exactly what you just said. We considered an EIT. We considered all the different options. We had many different public meetings and eventually came to a stormwater fee, which became a tax for legal reasons, and that's kind of how we implemented that tax a few years ago.
Yeah, and I would just add to what you said, that we spent a whole year of monthly meetings with a task force to develop that fee or tax structure before we actually implemented it. So it was a long, drawn-out, very inclusive kind of process before we did it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I was just hoping that that is the kind of discussion we would have in the fall with some data to go with it.
Hi, Sharon Purser from Berwyn Village Development. It's an 18-home community that splits between Easttown and Tredyffrin. So there are 6 homes in Tredyffrin and 12 homes in Easttown. And through the right-to-know process, we learned that the developer, Stonehaven Homes, agreed as a condition to settle the last home in the development, which we were all waiting for to finish this development. And as a condition to settle that, he avoided paying a $95,000 fee that was going to be applied to him as a 10% adjustment for each year that he has missed finishing the development. And the agreement was that he would have all the improvements finished by April 30th. And here we are. We have unfinished roads, missing lights, broken and crumbling curbs, landscaping is missing, no finished driveways, and the roads are incomplete. And there's been no word from the developer. Tredyffrin they signed the land development agreement with the developer, and he's in default. If he doesn't do the work, the township is required to finish the work. The burden should not be on the HOA to try to get him legally to finish it, nor should it be for all the residents that we have here to put landscaping in or finish their own driveways. Like, this is something we want to try to get resolved. Every week we keep hearing that he's going to be out and he's going to start, doing this and doing that, and every week he never shows up. So I guess the question we have is, will you hold him in default? I mean, he's not doing the work. So where are we?
Well, I'll let the solicitor talk about the legal requirements of accessing the escrow, but yeah, we have very limited options for us in terms of enforcing that unless it becomes a legal matter, and then it would be in the courts for, I'm not sure how long that would take. So we've been working very diligently on staff. We've responded to all your emails. Mr. Burgo and our consultants actually spoke to the project manager. Once again, he has told us that he will be there this week to do concrete work in Easttown and also finish the sidewalk in Tredyffrin. So we are hopeful that part of the work will take place. But it's not as easy as, the township's not responsible to go in and fix this unless we take access of the escrow, which becomes a very long, drawn-out legal process. Because in this case, the developer is still active. It's not an unavailable bank account. So Steve can give you an update on where they are in terms of our conversations with the contractor, and then our solicitor can tell you what would be the next steps legally for us if that doesn't get completed.
Sharon, thanks for your comments. We can give you a quick update. I did have a call with John McGrath and his project manager, Rich Baycheck, I think his last name is, and our inspectors from Princeton Hydro last week on the 16th. So right now, the current word from Stonehaven Homes is that they plan on starting construction on the concrete sidewalk and ADA ramps on the Price Avenue area this week. So they said Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the weather's going to be good. Our inspector is scheduled to be out there for those inspections. So obviously that comes directly from John McGrath's, word from our meeting last week. And his project manager had basically coordinated those inspections with our inspector who will be on site. In regards to the remaining items for the Tredyffrin side, there's lighting, there's landscaping, and there's the pavement portions, which is kind of split between both townships. The pavement's obviously the last thing. He's been not providing a date for that, but he's basically getting the information. He said by Wednesday of this week we should have more information, on the dates for lighting work to be done. He has I only can speak for the Tredyffrin side.
I understand.
We have lots, I think it's lots 1, 3, and 6 that still have lighting that has to be installed. There is one on lot 5. That one is active and it is working.
Correct.
So those 3 other ones, the electrical conduit has been run according to John and Rich. He just has to install the bases, and he said he has the light poles. They're not on site, but he has them somewhere. So they have to be installed. It's not that much, work. The concrete work, we're expecting that, if that work actually starts this week, it should be finished this week, at least for the Tredyffrin side. He did say that in Easttown, he has additional curb removal and replacement, which is going to take him some more time. I think there's more damage to the curb and some of the other stuff in the Easttown side. And then there's a portion of sidewalk, which, once again, the paving, the landscaping, we did ask him, I said, that's a day's worth of work. It's not a lot of work for a landscaper to plant those trees and shrubs. They're only really in the rears of lots 1 through 5 in Tredyffrin. I think lot 6 may have been planted, but I'm not 100% sure.
Not yet.
So he still has that work. We've identified those 6 lots in Tredyffrin, and he said he was basically reaching out to his landscape contractor to get dates for those installations. So when we get that information, we'll have obviously some more stuff we can share, but that's where we are to date. The paving, obviously, he's not dead. He hasn't given us a date for that because he's waiting for all the other work to be done before he can do that. Just one thing to clarify too is the escrow does not include any dollars for the driveway aprons. It's just the roadway paving. The on-lot stuff is actually not something that's escrowed as part of that. The driveway aprons for the houses for lots 1 through 6, at least in Tredyffrin, aren't part of the escrow. It's only the roadway that's actually covered in the escrow.
So the driveways don't get paved?
No, that's his part of his work that he has to.
He's not going to do it for free.
But he did mention to us, at least in our portions, whether it's part of the escrow or not, he's mentioned that as he'll be doing that as part of his final paving. So that's typically.
I guess the question is, can we get an assurance from all of you that that you won't release all the escrow funds until he finishes everything? Because he can't finish paving until he does all the concrete work in Easttown, so he can't pave in Tredyffrin. So is it fair to say that, don't release all of the escrow funds until everything is done and inspected, including the landscaping, the lights, the roads?
Yeah, that is the case. And in fact, I will say, ma'am, he hasn't made a request for an escrow release.
No, I know he hasn't. He has to do the work first.
Correct, that's my point. So he has not made an escrow release request in at least 3, if not more years than that, to your exact point, because it hasn't been done. So absolutely, everything has to be finally done and inspected before any release is done. It has to be reviewed and a letter sent by the engineer, essentially reviewing it and approving it, and then it has to be approved by the board before that escrow release will even be authorized.
So that's where we are. I mean, those are valuable assets. There may not even be enough, there might be just enough to finish.
We believe that after a review in December of last year, that there's more than enough escrow in place per our engineer's review to complete the work if need be. You have to give them at least 60 days notice under the agreement of his defect to see if he'll cure or not, depending on his response. Then we can take action to take the escrow, which can then either be done by township staff or would have to be bid out to do the work, depending upon the skills of the township staff, if it's work that they can complete or not.
Because he has said this prior, right? He's going to complete.
He has, I agree with you. I have multiple emails back and forth with him and his counsel to that effect.
We're 4 years in and we don't have trees, we don't have roads. We have a senior gentleman here who keeps stumbling in his driveway. I mean, it's like really ridiculous. So I would ask the Board of Supervisors, whoever is interested, can we get you guys to come out and look at the development?
I've been there, I've looked at it. I understand the problems you guys
So you
face.
understand that
I mean, legally, we can't take control of it because he keeps just doing the bare little minimum.
Can you see how frustrating that is to us as homeowners?
I mean, so I just call your attention to item O on our list from, Mr. Natoli, who waited how many years to get his money with a developer who defaulted. So, like, I think it is in our best interest. I mean, the township staff is doing a good.
Yeah, and I appreciate.
So they're
I've
doing what they can do.
Emailed, and I appreciate
And
the comments and the updates.
Unfortunately, the best strategy for you guys to get this done is for them to cajole this guy into doing the work until he finally just really doesn't do it, if in fact that is what he does.
What does it take to put him into default? Like,
Well,
what's the
The
trigger?
letter
What's
outline.
the trigger?
The trigger under the agreement is we have to provide essentially what we've already provided in some respects, which is, here's all the things that you are required to do per the plan that you have not done that is covered by the financial security agreement.
Right.
And go ahead and do it, and if you don't do it within this time period, which I believe is 60 days under the agreement, if you don't take steps to cure it, then we're going to declare you in default. We have to send a written notice now that you are in default, and then we send notice to, I don't know what kind of security it is, who's holding it. We then have to provide notice to get that security in hand, and we move forward at that point. So basically, it's two different types of notice to him.
So he comes out and he pours the sidewalk and he goes away for how long before you trigger?
So again, it's the same 60-day period
Okay.
for any of the work that's required to be done. So I don't know what kind of argument he will make in response. It may trigger a lawsuit against the township. I have no idea. That's what the agreement says is we have to provide him, which is not unusual, notice of default or notice of deficiency with an opportunity to cure. If he doesn't do it within a certain amount of time, then yes, we can move forward with the intention to take the security.
What would trigger that?
What would trigger what?
Define the time to notice of default.
What would trigger it?
He's way in default.
When the township tells us to send that notice, if the work's not getting done, we send the letter and we outline all the ways that he's in default. And then if he takes reasonable efforts to make the repairs, hopefully that would be great. If he doesn't, then we can take the steps to take the security to try to make the repairs ourselves, to complete the improvements ourselves.
Why can't that happen?
Sorry, I can't talk to all of you at one time.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, have you all seen the transition study that we had an engineer perform? It's pretty exhaustive.
No, because that doesn't involve the township, that involves the
No, I know, but
homeowners only.
it's important because there are a lot of items, including some of the sewage and the water systems, you know, they were like fail or in bad shape. They need to be clean, there's a lot of debris in them. My guess is he's not gonna do any of that, so are we gonna take steps to make sure that all of this stuff is done right and not just, you know, I don't know what the mechanisms are to make sure that we ensure that the punch lists are one thing, but, you know, we have another transition study that's pretty exhaustive. Is there an opportunity for the homeowners association and the townships and the developer to come together and try to work on, you know, what needs to be done? Because it's important to us as an HOA not to just accept this transition, because there's a lot of things that are wrong and we're up against, you know, a certain time frame as we've become an HOA. You know, there's a statute of limitations of what our responsibilities are to accept this development. And so, you know, from our perspective, we don't have the resources to continue to chase him down and, you know, pay somebody to try to get him to do what he should be doing. So I hope you feel our pain. I hope that you take mercy on us and act, you know, a little more aggressively with him. I feel like he's just, I don't know, he hasn't been, he's not a man of his word, and I'm not really sure what we do to rein him in. So any advice or any options that we haven't thought of that maybe you can think of? We do love our community, you know, we want just to be peaceful and enjoy it. And some of us, you know, are getting up in the years. We don't want to see it in the state that it's in. It's an eyesore. We have people along Cromer Avenue who are also tired of looking at, you know, the mess. People who used our walking path. It's a safety hazard. You know, there are broken concrete sidewalks. It's a mess. So whatever you can do to try to get this guy to finish, we would really appreciate it.
I can tell you, we're talking about it pretty regularly, and we'll push the township to do what they can do to get this resolved. So we feel your pain, and we're trying to do something for you. And at some point, we may end up being the guys who have to do the work. I mean, I get that. But in the meantime, we'd love to get him to do it, right? I mean, that's the best answer if we can.
Does anybody else?
If he doesn't do it in another 6 months, so
I need you, if you're going to speak, you need to come to the microphone because we have a virtual meeting. Well, I know it doesn't, people virtually, so.
Yeah, my name is Peter Wilding, and my wife and I were the first occupants of Berwyn Village. That is, in come August, that will be 4 years. After moving in, the driveway was interrupted for various corrections they had to make, and the driveway has never been adequately paved. Needless to say, you've mentioned the curbstones around the entire site are a disaster. One of the problems that I perceive is that you are constrained legally by lots of rules, but at the same time, you have the power to call this man in default. Now, you say you're giving him 60 days. My question would be, why didn't that 60 days start a year ago? Because he hasn't done hardly anything in the last year.
So we don't control timing. I think Mr. Curley sent an email to Sharon of how a developer completes this project. This is longer than usual, no question. And Tredyffrin, we have 6 residents. We can only control our side, so we've been trying to get him to do work. Now he's saying he's going to do the sidewalk work in Tredyffrin this week. If he doesn't, it's another discussion we have to say. If he doesn't complete it, which he promised he would, we can move forward. But that will only affect the residents in Tredyffrin Township. It will have nothing to do with the East Town side.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work it so we can get the things done as much as possible. And if we go down that road, the driveways are not included in the escrow, so they won't be part of the legal battle we may engage in. The driveways won't be part of that. That's not part of the escrow, and that won't be something we can construct. So we're trying to get as much out of him as we can. Look, if he doesn't come this week, then we have another discussion on what our next approach is. And that will affect those 6 residents in Tredyffrin Township. So we have the solicitor laid out the option. We have to notify him if that's a decision the board wants to make. And then we'll start down the legal process and see where that takes us. But we're hopeful that some work will start this week, and that's what we're hoping for. If not, then we have another decision point to consider.
Can I ask a simple question? Is he under contract or anything with any other development in this township?
Not in Tredyffrin, no.
Not in Tredyffrin, okay. Thank you.
Would you consider him in the future for another development if the opportunity, I mean, there are many projects that are coming into the development, so.
Unfortunately, one doesn't affect the other under the law. I
No?
can't, no,
Okay.
unfortunately, because they're completely different projects.
Got it.
But you certainly take it into consideration when dealing with the individual. You certainly, you take additional steps, I guess, is what I would say, right? You have to.
We have a virtual comment as well.
Okay. Mr. Huberg.
You can do that one.
Fine.
Thank you, Mike Heberg. I'll try to keep my comments to under 45 minutes for the benefit of Mr. McKenna, who just wants to watch the Phillies postgame show.
Thank you, Mr. Heberg. I appreciate that.
I am glad that we got around to the earned income tax discussion, even though it was in a little bit of a roundabout way. But, I think one of the previous speakers referenced the multiple sources of income that we already have in the township. And it has been discussed that we are in a strong financial position. I definitely fear any situation where the government at any level is looking for additional sources of revenue. So I think a combination of controlling expenses and the current sources of revenue we have are probably more than adequate to fund the needs of the township. One thing that's interesting is that, the property tax, especially at the township level, actually is probably what the lawyers would call, there's a logical nexus between the property tax and the services that are provided. Because basically, what you're primarily, if you look at the budget, about 75% of the budget is police and fire protection, right? So they're protecting your house and you're protecting your life and your property, right? And those are the services that the township provides. And therefore, they're paid for based on the value of your property. Your income doesn't have anything to do with, the services that the township provides to you, right? It's the value of your property. That's what they're protecting. So that's why it's evolved as a pretty effective and logical way. People who live in homes get the idea, and people who own offices get the idea that, I'm paying for somebody to look after my stuff, my house, my property. So that's part of the sort of the rationale behind the idea of a property tax. Another thing that's been raised, and this speaks to the issue around multiple streams of income, and is that, this is really one of the clear distinctive advantages. If you talk to anybody who, to working families, and you talk to people who own businesses, a clear distinctive competitive advantage this township has is the absence of an earned income tax. We had, Mr. Khan made mention of it, but all the suburban counties, and all the urban counties for that matter, are challenged by commercial office space. So to the extent that you can distinguish yourself by not assessing taxes on people who have businesses, if people think, well, that's, the taxpayer is the property owner, it really is, the tenant is the taxpayer. The tenant is the one, the tax is built into their rent, and they're paying for it. And tenants, and I'm in that position, make decisions based on where they're being best treated. And that has always been, the absence of an earned income tax has always been probably the single, and the lack of a business privilege tax. Granted, they present some financial challenges for the township, but the commercial property tax base that this community has is the golden goose in a lot of ways. You can look at the township budget, look at the revenue line items. We have about $1 billion worth of commercial property. $4 million a year, real estate taxes from the commercial properties. We have the local services tax. We charge $52 on every employee who comes into this township to work. That's another $1.8 million, something like that. Large transfers. When these commercial properties change hands, they're not $800,000, $1 million to $500,000. They're $20 million, $50 million, $80 million. And I would guess if you average the large property tax transfers every year over the last 10 years, really since the 15 years almost, or since the Great Recession, it's probably averaged $3 million a year. Okay, so we're up to $9 million. Building permits. A lot of the building permits are for commercial space, either commercial additions, fit outs of office space. I mean, it's probably, if you ran down the line, the commercial properties are probably paying 40% of all the tax that gets paid into the Tredyffrin Township. And it's to do anything that might upset that balance, I think would be very perilous. I'd also add to that the fact that the commercial properties in Tredyffrin Township alone pay $27 million a year in school tax. And I've never seen a yellow school bus pull up in any of them and pick up children. So,
what about Mr. Khan's point that we're going to lose or a massive amount of money when we have the reassessments that are going to hit our commercial properties? He said that. He's the county's best developer, and he said we're going to see a massive loss of revenue. How do you fix that gap?
What I can tell you is you look around the county, East Whiteland, the occupancy issue is much greater than this here. West Whiteland, all these other neighboring townships that have earned income tax, the problem is much worse. You look at every township in Chester County.
Half a percent? No,
What's that?
They don't have 0.5%. They have 1 or greater percent.
Some don't have 1%. Some are half. Some are 3/4. Willistown's like 0.85. There are different levels. And by the way, I forget who brought.
What do you do about the retirees?
Hold on.
Well, no. You lecture us nearly every month, Mr. Hebert. Okay. So let's take a break. It's 10 o'clock. I'm a little tired of getting lectured at. all right? I've heard all these arguments. They're repetitive.
Go ahead.
They're repetitive. You're coming to the same thing every time we have this debate, all right? So I've heard very few solutions for you for the funding gap that we will see in the future, all right? What are we going to do about retirees that can't afford the increasing property taxes here? What are we going to do about a library that's crumbling down, that's going to cost tens of millions of dollars? I hear very little solutions from you. I just hear a lot of complaining. So I'm a little tired. I know it's late. I am sorry for this, but this may not be the best time to do it right now.
Let me ask you a question. Have we ever had a discussion in this room about the earned income tax? We have not. In 2003.
We absolutely did.
Hold on.
Many times.
In 2023, we had a study and basically a decision was made not to, that we weren't going to go forward with it. So we really haven't had the discussion. To what Ms. Supervisor Bhaskar said, we really haven't had a discussion of this. Okay? So the point is,
Can I ask
and by the way, I'm just providing with facts, okay? I'm giving you some facts.
Excuse
and
me.
It's my point, it's a point of view that is informed by some facts, and that's what I'm presenting so that people have some ideas around what is the challenge that we face. I'm not suggesting that I have all the answers. What I'm saying is, if you want to decimate your commercial property owners, if you want to decimate your working families.
That kind of language is so ridiculous. And I hear it from your side so often, sir.
From
We're
my
not
side?
trying to decimate commercial property, all right? I'm not trying to welcome murderers and rapists across the border and across our country. Work on your language, okay? Just let's moderate. Let's bring down, let's add some civility
Do me a
here.
favor and don't my side me, okay? So the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is, this would damage our commercial sector.
Were you the
in
former
my
chairman of the
opinion.
Republican Party in Tredyffrin County, sir?
I was not.
Okay,
I
were
was
you
not.
were you Republican supervisor, sir?
Can I ask the question? Wait, hold on. Let me ask a question. Let me interject here, because I didn't heard everybody up here I can't even describe it right now. There seems to be this divide, okay? And I'm going to say this again. I've only been on this board for a year. What is this, April? Year and 4 months. And it seems like there's this divide that we keep saying commercial and residential. Now, to me, and this is my own opinion, there is not the same commercial as what we had prior to the pandemic. It doesn't exist. I don't care how you put it, you can throw it like spaghetti and stick it on the wall. We don't have those same numbers. We have people who work for companies who are out here, but they're not here, okay? You keep saying, and I've heard you say, and I've heard other people say, okay, EIT's bad, we got this surplus and all of this, and that's all well and good. But eventually, we're not going to have this surplus. Eventually, there's going to be a whole bunch of people in this township, including me, who's going to retire. So I'm not going to get a paycheck. I'm just going to hopefully get Social Security if it still exists and whatever else. So there may be $18 million, I think David said, that's sitting there now. But let's say something happens in the next year and that $18 million disappears and it goes down to 10 or 5 or whatever. And school, which I know they do every year, is going to come and ask for some more money, which means the property tax is going to go up. There's no way they're not going to come and ask for some money as long as I'm sitting here, because the school board somehow always has to have some extra money because they got to pay the custodian, pay the teachers, do this, that, there, and the other. So the property tax is going to go up. Now, I'm not saying the EIT is right. I'm not saying the EIT is wrong. But we got to come to a happy medium to figure out how we're going to keep this place running. It can't be, it's like, I don't want to pay for anything, or I don't want to do, but somebody comes from outside and they use the services. I worked in Philadelphia actually up until the pandemic, and I paid city wage tax. I paid the city more than I paid the state. That was a little scary to me when I started looking at my paycheck real good, that I paid the city of Philadelphia much more money than I paid the state, or I paid out here in Tredyffrin. But I had to pay them. I couldn't do it. Once they closed up and we moved out here and they said, okay, everybody go home, then the city had to give me my money back, and they started screaming and hollering because it was like, you got to give me my money back. Well, give me my $3,000 that I gave you that I'm not using anything for except for getting off a SEPTA and walking across the street. Didn't use the cops, didn't use that, but I still had to pay it. I get what you're saying, but we got to figure out how to make this work. We got to come to a happy medium, whether it's the EIT, whether it's tax, we got to come to a happy medium, because that 18 million is not going to last. People are going to retire. Folks are going to move to Florida. They're going to move to Arizona. I don't see a whole bunch of young people with a 7% interest rate running out here to buy $1 million house. I just don't see it. It's just not there. So even though you're talking about commercial property, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. We got to come to a happy medium. I get what Matt's saying. I get what David's saying. Sometime I'm going to say this, and please don't nobody get offended. I'm sitting on this board. I feel like I'm here with 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Okay? That's just sometimes how my mind feels when stuff gets going. And then other times I feel like I'm sitting here with all Democrats. And then sometimes I'm not. So it's got to get fixed. But it's not going to get fixed the way you're doing it. It's not going to get fixed the way Matt's doing it. We got to come to a happy medium. Everybody's got to sit down and we got to look at stuff. And that means the Rocco's got to go through numbers. Unfortunately, I feel sorry for him. But, if the Rocco's got to go through numbers, if Vasco's got to ask the Rocco to go through numbers, if you want to come over here and sit up here and come up with some numbers, that would be lovely. But we have to come to a happy medium. Because we can't keep doing this. I can't keep sitting up here hearing everybody screaming and hollering about 1%, 10%, 18 million, 5 million. I'm like, good gosh, we got $1 million houses out here. We got 2, because I go down and look. And I'm like, that house is worth $2 million? Oh, okay. All right. So we got to get to a happy medium. We just have to do it. Everybody's got to sit down and we got to have a conversation.
And to your part, Supervisor Carlotta, is, I guess part of my frustration was just that the argument was won tonight. There was no motion. It was conceded. I think we're all moving forward past this, and there's nothing really before us. I encourage an EIT debate. I think it's a fine thing. But I think as for purposes tonight, there was no motion on the table, and that has been conceded at this point.
Well, I think that it was basically, the idea was that it gives us an opportunity during new business, somebody raised it, and that's why we're talking about it. And so, but it's a balance. I mean, to your point, Supervisor Johnson-Pugh, I mean, this falls on working families, people who are in their 30s and 40s, working hard, raising kids. That's who it falls on. It doesn't fall on people who are my age, guys who are retired or getting close to retired.
People like me.
Exactly, people like you. And by the way, and I'm still working, and I would have to pay an EIT and whatever. But all that being said, you have people who are trying to get started in this community that we want to build their lives in this community, who are getting punished. And I think there's a certain social compact that goes along with the idea that I've lived in this community since I bought my first house in this community over 40 years ago, right? And I raised kids and sent them to the schools and all that. And it's like, well, you know what? Once I'm retired, this is great. I'm getting to a point, and they're going to put an EIT in, and I'm going to be retired, so my taxes are going to go way down. I think what was interesting, and I don't know how many here attended the meetings over in Easttown Township when they discussed the EIT. They were very well attended. There was a couple hundred people there. 98% of those who at least spoke were against it, and a very large number of those people who spoke against it were people who were retired. They said, this isn't how we do things in this community. We all pay for the services together. Just because I'm retired doesn't mean that I shouldn't have to keep kicking in, because, I send kids, through the schools. I've had all the assets so, what I'm suggesting is, I think that the fact that we don't have an EIT is a big advantage. I think it attracts businesses, small business owners. It attracts working families in a way that's distinctive. And I appreciate the fact that there are apparently a number of supervisors who see that and have acted in order to renew the commitment that this community has. I think that one thing that would be helpful is, it's kind of been an on and off kind of discussion over the last several years, to give people the ability to think about, okay, in my case, we're getting ready to sign a new lease for office space in the next year. Like, is there going to be an EIT here, or isn't there going to be an EIT? And this is going on all over the township. People are looking at, we'd like to have some clarity as to whether this is going to happen or is not, because I think that would allow people who are making decisions either to move here or stay here as individuals, as families, as businesses, to know what the ground rules are going to be. I think the uncertainty and the on-off again nature can be difficult. So I thank you for indulging my comments at this late hour, and I guess well, maybe there's some behind me, but thanks very much, and thanks to Murph. He was the Swiss Army knife this month with all the reports. I commend him for that. So good night, everybody.
Thank you. Is someone online wanted to have their hand up? Or just... Michelle's
Not
still
there
there.
anymore.
Ray Clark, just really quickly. I think the world is changing. I think we're seeing more apartment dwellers. I think an earned income tax is one way to connect those kinds of people directly to the services and the benefits of the township. I think that half of our residents already pay an earned income tax to another township. And I think that tonight's discussion shows how important it is to have this kind of debate as part of our budget process. I think Bhaskar's idea is crazy, to substitute an EIT for the stormwater fee. No, don't do that. But have a discussion about where an EIT, diversifying our general fund income may make sense. And so now I got to go get someone from a trade. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is this still on? I'm Joanne Fisher. I live on Chase Road, and I'm president of the Chesterbrook Civic Association. I'd just like to make a few comments specifically about how this was handled. I think that what residents of our township are used to are long, publicly advertised conversations about any new tax, any fees, any big projects like the Wilson Farm Park update or refresh. I think that normally we're used to our township providing long public conversations, first by identifying a problem such as a shortfall, and then working on how to solve that problem, finding a solution, not trying to study how a very large tax increase might look, right? Just came off very poorly for all of us. I think that's a tough time for a lot of our residents, and so to start talking so broadly and so rapidly and also around a holiday weekend was also very disturbing for a lot of our residents. I'm still getting calls and emails from people trying to understand what happened. So just a view from the resident side. Okay. As you know, there are elections coming up. Civic Association does run a candidate forum, and this is a really big topic for residents, and people want to know who's for EIT and who's against. So just sharing some information with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. I have a question. Did you actually read what was on the draft agenda? Did the residents actually read what was on the agenda? And was it clear that it was not advocating for or against an EIT, but it was asking for information? Was that clear?
I want to say this, honestly, Bhaskar, that I think that just the fact that you're asking to make a motion at a public meeting without any prior discussion, right? I think it was frightening for residents. I do.
So asking for information is frightening for residents. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the way it was worded, yeah, I'm getting a little badgered here, right? But, no, the way it was worded, the fact that there was no ever prior discussion at any other meetings, and I come to most of the meetings. And, yeah, I think it could have been handled better. I'm not blaming you personally, but I think people need to have longer-term conversations about things.
Okay, no,
Thank you, Ms.
I
Fisher.
hear that it could have been handled better because of the fact that you're up there speaking
Mhm.
about the fact that you're basically saying that to ask for information, you need to have a discussion about asking for information. So clearly it was mishandled because we shouldn't be in that situation where asking for information requires a discussion about asking for information. But anyway, here we are.
Perhaps the way you asked for information or the way you worded it was alarming for people. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
You're welcome. What's that?
Any other public comment? Public new business, yeah? All right, the next meeting is going to be Wednesday, everybody, Wednesday, May 21st. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.